Welcome to Anana's creation. Tonight, we begin a new saga. A story from the cold north. A story of gods and monsters, of oaths and sacrifices, of law, and the terrible price of justice. This is the story of Tyr, the one-handed god. Long before the world knew its end, in the golden heart of the Nine Realms, the city of Asgard shimmered. It was not just a city of gold and light, as the mortal poets would later sing. It was a city built on a principle, an idea so radical it held the chaos of the cosmos at bay. That idea was law. The realms outside were a storm of raw, untamed power. Jotunheim, the land of the giants, was a place of brute force and broken promises. Muspelheim burned with eternal, unthinking fire. Midgard, the world of humans, was a fragile, fleeting stage of desperate survival. But Asgard was different. It was the great experiment of the Aesir, the gods of the sky, and they intended it to be a beacon of order. And the chief architect of that order, the pillar that held the entire structure of their society upright, was Tyr. While his kin were known for other, louder qualities, Tyr was defined by his silence, his stillness, his unshakable integrity. Thor, his brother-in-arms, was the realm's shield. He was the thunder, the storm, the physical might that smashed mountains and laid giants low. Thor's solution to a problem was almost always his hammer, Mjolnir. Odin, the All-Father, was the realm's mind. He was the seeker of secrets, the master of runes and magic, the one-eyed king who would sacrifice anything, even himself, for knowledge and the prevention of the end. But Tyr was the realm's conscience. He was the god of justice, but more than that, he was the god of the sworn oath. In a world of magic, prophecy, and gods who could change their shape as easily as a man might change his coat, Tyr believed in one thing: your word. He believed that the law was the only true magic, the only force that could bind gods and monsters alike. He believed that without procedure, without the binding agreement of a contract, they were no better than the snarling beasts they kept at their borders. In these days, Tyr was whole. He was the finest swordsman in Asgard, a martial prowess that few dared to test. His left hand was as strong as his right. He was tall, with a warrior's build, but his eyes were not the eyes of a berserker. They were the eyes of a judge, calm, steady, and seeing. He moved through the golden halls of Valhalla and Bilskirnir not as a reveler, but as an arbitrator. His domain was the thing, the great assembly of the gods, held under the cosmic boughs of Yggdrasil, the world tree. It was here that Asgard's fate was debated, not with swords, but with words. When a dispute arose between Freya and Frigg over a whispered insult, it was Tyr who mediated. When a trade agreement with the dwarves of Nidavellir went sour, it was Tyr who reviewed the contract and found the loophole. He was the one who held the scales. His voice was never the boom of Thor or the cryptic whisper of Odin. It was measured, clear, and final. Other gods, especially the boisterous Thor, found Tyr's obsession with procedure to be, frankly, boring. "Why sit and talk for 3 days about a stolen goat?" Thor would grumble. "When I can take my hammer, find a thief, and have the goat returned before sundown?" And Tyr would always reply, his voice never rising, "Because, brother, if you retrieve the goat with your hammer, you have proven only that you are strong. But if we retrieve the goat with the law, we have proven that we are right. Strength fades. The law endures." This was Tyr's faith. This was his religion. He had absolute, unwavering belief in the system he had built. He believed any dispute could be settled, any argument resolved, any threat contained, if only the correct procedures were followed. He had not yet learned that some things exist outside of reason. He had not yet faced a force that did not care for laws, that could not be reasoned with, that was born of pure, unadulterated chaos. The shadow that would test his faith was already growing, born in the darkest corners of Jotunheim. The whispers had reached Asgard, carried on the sly, honeyed tongue of Loki. Loki, the trickster, the god of fire and mischief, the blood brother of Odin, had been busy. On one of his many excursions away from the Order of Asgard, he had found a companion in the land of the giants. Her name was Angerboa, a giantess, a bringer of grief. And with her, Loki had fathered 3 anomalies, 3 children of chaos. The All-Father, Odin, saw them in his prophetic visions. He saw a great serpent, Jormungandr, so vast it could coil around the entire world of Midgard. He saw a spectral queen, Hel, half living and half dead, destined to rule the joyless realm of the dishonored dead. and he saw a wolf. At first, it was just a pup, small and dark. But in Odin's visions, the pup grew at an alarming rate. It grew larger than any wolf that had ever been seen. Its eyes burned with a cold, intelligent hunger. Its jaws, even in the vision, seemed capable of snapping the pillars of the world. The Norns, the weavers of fate, had whispered its name to him, Fenrir, and they had whispered a prophecy that this wolf was fated to one day swallow the sun and to be the end of Odin himself. Fear, for the first time in an age, settled upon Asgard. It was a cold, quiet dread that no amount of mead or feasting could chase away. "We must act," Odin declared, his one eye blazing as he called an emergency council at the thing. "Let me go to Jotunheim," Thor bellowed, gripping Mjolnir so tightly his knuckles turned white. "I will find this pup. I will crush its skull before it grows another inch. The problem will be solved." "No," Odin said, his voice a low rumble. "The prophecy is set. To strike it down now, in its mother's cave, would be a dishonorable act. It is murder, not justice. It would only strengthen the chaos we seek to avoid. No, the children of Loki must be brought to Asgard. Here, where I can watch them." A collective murmur of unease swept through the assembly. "To bring such things into the Golden City? Bring them here?" Thor argued. "Father, that is madness. It is inviting the snake into the house. It is better to have the poison where we can see it," Odin countered. "We will contain them. We will manage them." The gods looked at each other, their faces etched with doubt. This was a problem that muscle could not solve, and that magic had foretold. They were trapped. Then one voice, clear and steady, cut through the dread. It was Tyr. He stood, his hand on the hilt of his sword, not to draw it, but to ground himself. "The All-Father is correct," Tyr announced. His gaze swept the assembly, holding the eyes of every god. "We are the Aesir. We are the guardians of order. We cannot act as barbarians driven by fear of what might be. If these creatures are brought to Asgard, they must be treated as all beings are, under the law. We will not preemptively punish them for a crime they have not yet committed. Let them be brought here. We will see them. We will judge their character, not their prophecy. And we will do what is right. It is the only way." His words were strong. His conviction was a light in the growing darkness. The gods, reassured by his certainty, nodded in agreement. The law would hold. The system would work. Tyr, the god of justice, had decreed it. But as he spoke, Tyr could not know the truth. He could not know that this wolf, this Fenrir, would not test his strength with a sword. It would not test his mind with a riddle. It would test his very soul. It would force him to look at the law he so loved and then ask him to break it or be broken by it. The trap was being set, and Tyr, the two-handed god, the champion of procedure, was walking directly into it, blind to the terrible sacrifice that justice would soon demand of him. The decision, once made by Tyr's unshakable logic and Odin's grim necessity, was executed with brutal speed. There was no delegation. Odin, Thor, and Tyr himself led the grim procession. They crossed the Bifrost, the shimmering rainbow bridge, not in triumph, but as executioners or, perhaps, as child catchers. The mood was heavy, the air thick with a dread that even Thor's bravado couldn't pierce. They descended into the cold, dark, and rocky expanse of Jotunheim, the land of the giants. It was a place of broken mountains and frozen rivers, a realm where agreements were worth less than the breath they were spoken on. Here, law was an alien concept. Here, only strength mattered. They found the giantess Angerboa in a cave dripping with ice, hidden deep within a lightless forest. She was a fearsome sight, a creature of raw, primal power, but she did not resist. Loki was notably absent. He was never one to face the consequences of his creative endeavors. Angerboa watched with cold, hateful eyes as the lords of Asgard approached her children. She offered no protest, no plea. It was as if she knew this was fated, or perhaps she simply did not care for a fight she could not win. The children were unsettling. First, there was the serpent, Jormungandr. Even as a youngling, it was impossibly long, coiled in the shadows of the cave like a living, scaled mountain range. It hissed, a sound like steam escaping a deep earth vent, and its eyes, each the size of a shield, held a cold, ancient, and venomous intelligence. It did not fear the gods. It simply hated them. Then there was the girl Hel. She sat perfectly still on a rock, observing the intruders. She was the most disturbing of all. One side of her body was that of a beautiful, pale child, with bright blue eyes and dark hair. The other side, from the center of her face down her torso and leg, was the rotting, skeletal, gray-fleshed corpse of the dead. She was a living paradox, a perfect line drawn between life and decay. She did not speak. She just watched, her half-living, half-dead eyes missing nothing. And finally, there was the pup, Fenrir. He was just a wolf, or so it seemed at first. He was larger than any normal pup, to be sure, with paws the size of a man's head and fur the color of a starless night. But he was a dog. When Thor approached, Mjolnir in hand, the pup merely tilted its head, its tongue lolling out in a pant. It whimpered, a low, playful sound. It was an image of innocence that stood in stark, terrifying contrast to the prophecy that hung over its head. "This is the creature that will end the world?" Thor muttered, his grip on his hammer faltering. "Do not be fooled by what you see, brother," Tyr said, his eyes fixed on the wolf. "This is not a beast of Midgard. It is a child of chaos. Look at its eyes." Thor looked. The pup's eyes were not brown, or blue, or yellow. They were a swirling, depthless black, windows into a hunger so vast it felt like staring into the void between stars. The journey back to Asgard was a silent, tense affair. The Aesir returned to the Golden City with their 3 burdens, 3 living embodiments of their destruction. The citizens of Asgard, the other gods and goddesses, watched from their halls, their faces pale. The music and laughter of the great city died. The children of chaos had arrived. Odin wasted no time. He knew these forces could not be allowed to fester within his walls. He stood at the edge of the Bifrost, his face a mask of grim resolve. He dealt with the first 2 children swiftly. He seized Jormungandr, the great serpent, and with a word of binding magic and a heave of divine strength, he hurled the creature from Asgard, down through the realms, into the great, uncharted ocean that surrounded the world of mortals, Midgard. "Grow and coil in the deep," Odin commanded, "and encircle the world. But you shall not leave the sea until the day of Ragnarok, when the world's end is nigh." He believed he had imprisoned it. He did not realize he had merely given it a kingdom to grow in. Next, he turned to the silent, half-dead girl, Hel. He looked upon her, and she looked back, her gaze unwavering. He could not kill her, for she was already half-dead. He could not keep her, for her very presence was a blight on the living. So, he banished her. "You are a creature of 2 worlds," he said, his voice echoing with power. "So you shall rule one. I cast you down to Niflheim, the realm of mist and shadow. There, you shall be queen over all who die of sickness, or old age, or any death not in glorious battle. You shall rule the dishonored dead." And so, Hel was cast down, and the gates of a new, grim realm were opened. Odin had contained another threat. 2 down. 1 remained. Fenrir. Odin turned to the wolf pup. The creature was sitting at Tyr's feet, calmly chewing on a discarded piece of rope. What could be done? The prophecy was specific. The wolf would slay Odin, and it would do so at Ragnarok. To kill it now would be dishonorable, an act of fear, not justice. And besides, there was a chance, however small, that prophecy could be unmade, or at least managed. "We will raise it," Odin declared, his voice leaving no room for argument. "We will show this child of chaos the order of Asgard. We will tame it with our laws and our reason. It will live here among us." The gods were horrified, but Odin's word was final. For the first week, it was a novelty. The gods would watch from a distance as the pup played in the fields of Ida, a dark shadow on the golden grass. But the novelty quickly turned to terror. The pup did not grow as animals do. It expanded. Every day, it doubled in size. The food of Asgard, the meat and meat of the gods, fueled its chaotic nature. Within a month, the pup was the size of a warhorse. Within 2, it was larger than any creature in the 9 realms, save the great serpent, its brother. Its playful nips could now shatter a shield. Its playful bark could shake the foundations of a hall. And its hunger was endless. The gods, one by one, stopped visiting the field. Thor, who feared nothing, found himself making excuses. Odin watched from his tower, his one eye dark with worry. The gods were afraid. No one would approach the wolf. No one would feed it. No one, except Tyr. Every morning and every evening, The god of justice would walk alone to the great plain where the wolf was now kept. He was the only one in Asgard who did not show fear. The other gods saw a monster, a fated doom. Tyr, in his unwavering, almost stubborn adherence to his principles, saw only a creature that had, as of yet, broken no laws. It was being held prisoner for a crime it had not committed. He must eat, Tyr would say simply to the others. We brought him here. It is our responsibility. And so, Tyr became the wolf's keeper. He would approach the monstrous creature, which now towered over him, its black eyes burning. He would lay down massive sides of beef, and the wolf would devour them, bones and all, in a single gulp. The beast, Fenrir, showed no affection. It did not wag its tail. It did not act like a dog, but it recognized Tyr. It allowed him, and only him, to approach. A strange, silent bond was forming between the two, the god of law and the beast of chaos. Tyr, in these moments, was still whole. He still had both his hands. He would sometimes, in a gesture of profound and perhaps foolish faith, lay his hand on the wolf's massive head, feeling the heat and the contained power beneath the dark fur. He believed, with all his heart, that his own integrity, his own adherence to justice, could tame the beast. He believed the law was strong enough. He did not yet understand. The wolf was not a test for the law. It was a trap, and it was waiting. Time in Asgard does not pass as it does in the mortal world, but even in the realm of the gods, days turned into months. And with every passing moon, the beast known as Fenrir grew, and the golden city of Asgard began to feel less like a fortress and more like a cage. The wolf was no longer a pup, nor even a beast. It was a monument. It was a living, breathing mountain of black fur and uncontainable power, a shadow that had blotted out the sun. When Fenrir lay down to rest, he was the size of a hill. When he stood, his back was level with the rooftops of the highest halls. When he howled, a sound of pure, bottomless hunger. The very stones of Asgard's walls would vibrate, and the gods would freeze, the mead turning sour in their cups. His hunger was a void. The Aesir, the gods of order, were now forced to be his providers, diverting vast herds of celestial cattle to his plain, just to keep him from turning his gaze upon the city itself. The gods, who had once walked their realm in confidence, now moved in fear. They stayed away from the plain of Ida. They bolted their doors at night. The laughter in Valhalla had stopped. Tyr, and only Tyr, continued his grim duty. He was the only living thing in all the 9 realms that Fenrir would allow to approach. The bond between them had not changed, but it had scaled with the beast. Tyr would walk into the shadow of the wolf, a small, upright figure of unbending principle before a towering colossus of chaos. He would deliver the food, and the wolf's cavernous jaws would snap it from the air. The beast's black, intelligent eyes would watch him, not with affection, but with a terrifying, calculating patience. The tension in Asgard finally broke. Odin called another council at the thing. The mood was no longer one of grim necessity. It was panic. This cannot continue. Frigg, the queen of the gods, declared, her voice trembling but firm. We are prisoners in our own home. The children are afraid. The light of Asgard is dimming. The All-Father's plan has failed, bellowed Thor, his hand on his hammer. He was not boastful now. He was angry and afraid. This is not a pet. It is a doom. Let me end this. I do not care for prophecy or honor. Let me strike it down now. And what happens when you strike, son? Odin's voice was weary, ancient. You, the strongest of us, strike him with Mjolnir. Perhaps you wound him. Perhaps you make him bleed. And in his rage, he turns on the city. Do you think these walls will hold against that? Do you think you could strike a second time before he has swallowed half of Asgard? No. Your hammer created this problem, siblings. It will not solve this one. The assembly fell silent. The strongest god was admitting fear. The wisest god was admitting failure. Into this silence, Tyr once again spoke. His voice was the only one that remained level, calm, and rooted in the law. We cannot kill him. He has committed no crime. He is a guest, by our own invitation. To strike him down would be murder, and Asgard would be built on a lie. But he paused, his gaze sweeping the room. The All-Father and Queen Frigg are right. The beast is a clear and present danger to the public order. He cannot be allowed to roam free. And how do you propose we stop him? Sneered Loki, who had been watching the proceedings with the amusement of a spectator at a play he had written. He is larger than the mountains of Jotunheim. What will you do, Tyr? Write him a sternly worded summons. Tyr ignored the trickster. He looked directly at Odin. He is not an enemy to be slain. He is a force to be contained. We will not kill him. We will bind him. The word hung in the air. Bind him. It was a legal, orderly solution. It was a procedure. It was not murder. It was containment. The gods seized upon the idea. Yes, binding. It will have to be a test, Odin said, his mind already working, the spark of the schemer returning to his eye. We cannot simply attack him with chains. He will destroy us all. It must be a game, a challenge to his strength. The smiths of Asgard were put to the task. They were ordered to create the mightiest chain ever conceived. For a week, the forges of the city roared, ringing day and night. The dwarves, masters of the craft, were consulted. They labored, pouring all their skill into one great work. They called it Linger. It was a chain of such thickness that each link was the size of a man's torso. It was forged of the hardest Asgardian steel, cooled in the blood of frost giants, and inscribed with runes of binding. When it was finished, it took 10 gods just to carry it out of the forge. They brought it to the plain of Ida, the great chain rattling and groaning, gouging the golden earth. The gods, Thor, Odin, Loki, and several others, came to watch, but they stayed at a distance. Only Tyr walked forward, standing before the great wolf who rose to meet him, blotting out the sky. Great Fenrir, Tyr called out, his voice clear. He did not lie, not truly. He simply framed the truth. The gods of Asgard marvel at your power. Your growth is a legend. But we wonder, is your strength as great as your size? Fenrir merely watched, his massive head tilted, his black eyes unblinking. Loki, emboldened by the game, slithered forward. We have a challenge for you, little pup. A test of strength. We have forged a chain, the mightiest in the 9 realms. We wager that even you, great as you are, cannot break it. The wolf was not a fool. He was a creature of chaos, but he possessed a cunning that rivaled Odin's. He looked at the massive chain. He looked at the nervous, watching gods. And then he looked at Tyr. Tyr, the one who had always brought him food. Tyr, the one who had never shown fear. Tyr, the pillar of law, who could not tell a lie. Fenrir's thoughts were his own, but his gaze seemed to ask a single question. You, too? Tyr met the gaze. It is only a test of your might, Fenrir, Tyr said. There is no dishonor. Show them your power. Allow us to bind you, and then show them the strength of the son of Loki. This, perhaps, was the argument that swayed the beast, the appeal to his pride, and the reassurance from the only voice in Asgard he trusted. Slowly, rumbling like an earthquake, the great wolf lay down. He lowered his massive head and front legs. Bind me. The voice rumbled, less a word than a vibration in the chest. With trembling hands, the other gods, Thor chief among them, rushed forward. They wrapped the colossal chain, Linger, around the wolf's neck, his chest, his great forelegs. They hammered the lock shut. The beast was bound, anchored to the very bedrock of Asgard. The gods backed away, their hands on their weapons. Thor gripped Mjolnir. Now, wolf, he taunted. Let us see you break that. Fenrir waited. He lay still, breathing calmly, letting the full weight of the iron settle upon him. He looked at the gods, one by one. Then he looked at Tyr. And then he stood up. It was not a struggle. It was not an effort. It was a simple, fluid act of rising. The chain Linger did not stretch or groan. It simply disintegrated. The thickest steel in the 9 realms, the runes of binding, the masterwork of the gods, shattered like glass. The links exploded outward, raining down on the fields of Ida like a hailstorm of iron shrapnel, forcing the gods to raise their shields. The wolf stood, free, the broken remnants of the shackle hanging from his neck like a useless necklace. He shook his massive body, and the remaining links flew off, embedding themselves in the distant city walls. He did not attack. He did not roar. He simply stood there, in a terrible, silent triumph. The gods were frozen, not with fear, but with a new, colder emotion, dread. This was not a beast. This was a force of nature. This was prophecy itself, standing on their lawn. And Tyr, the god of justice, stared at the broken chain. His law had been applied. His procedure had been followed. And the chains of order had been broken like twigs. For the first time in his long, unwavering life, Tyr felt a cold knot of doubt. His system had failed. The plain of Ida was silent, save for the whistling wind and the sound of iron shrapnel settling into the golden grass. The gods of Asgard, the most powerful beings in the 9 realms, stood frozen, their shields raised, their confidence shattered like the links of their greatest chain. Fenrir, the wolf, simply watched them. He had not moved. He had not attacked. He did not need to. In his terrible, silent victory, he had proven a horrifying truth. He was beyond their strength. Order, in the form of Asgard's finest steel, had failed to contain him. Thor was the first to lower his shield, his face a mask of thunderous disbelief and, beneath it, a sliver of genuine fear. He looked at his hammer, Mjolnir, as if questioning its power for the first time. Loki, for once, was not smiling. The trickster, who loved to set chaos in motion, was now looking at a form of chaos so pure and so vast that even he found no humor in it. Odin, the Allfather, turned his back to the wolf. He did not run. He simply walked away, his shoulders slumped, the weight of prophecy settling on him like a shroud. Back to the council hall, he commanded, his voice a low, gravelly whisper. We have failed. We must think. The gods retreated, a defeated army in their own home. Only Tyr remained for a moment longer. He stood alone on the field, facing the beast. He was the wolf's keeper. He was the god of justice. And his system, his belief in containable, physical law, had just been pulverized. He looked at Fenrir, not with fear, but with a deep, profound, and unsettling respect. The wolf's black eyes met his. There was no malice in them, only truth. A truth that Tyr had ignored. He gave a slow, curt nod to the beast, a gesture from one great power to another, and then turned to follow his king. The wolf watched him go, then laid its mountainous head down upon its paws, and waited. Inside the great hall of Gladsheim, the mood was funereal. The gods argued, they shouted, they despaired. We must fight, Thor roared, slamming his fist on the great table. Let us all attack at once. He cannot stand against all of us. He shattered Linger by standing up, replied Balder, the god of light, his voice hushed. That chain was forged with all our strength. He is not strong, Thor. He is strength. To fight him is to fight the concept of power itself. We cannot win that way. Then we must flee, cried another. Abandon Asgard. Let him have it. And go where? Odin's voice cut through the panic. The 9 realms are connected. Yggdrasil, the world tree, holds us all. If Asgard falls, the rot will spread. Midgard will be devoured. The realms will collapse one by one. Fleeing is not an option. It is merely a slower death. The hall fell silent again, the gods trapped by their own dimming fate. If strength has failed us, a calm voice said, then we must use what is not strength. All eyes turned to Tyr. He stood by the high seat, his face carved from stone. Odin's one eye focused on him, a spark of curiosity in its depths. Explain yourself, god of law. Linger was a chain of steel, Tyr said, his voice resonating with its old certainty. It was a physical object. We tried to bind a physical form. But Fenrir is not just a physical form. He is a child of chaos. He is a prophecy. We tried to bind his body, and we failed. We must, instead, bind his nature. Loki, who had been sulking, suddenly let out a high-pitched, knowing giggle. Oh, this is rich. The great god of law is suggesting magic. I am suggesting, Tyr corrected, his gaze unwavering, that we have been using the wrong tools. We have been trying to build a cage of steel when we should be building one of concepts. Odin's eye widened. He understood. Svartalfheim, the All-Father whispered. The other gods looked confused, but Odin and Loki now shared a look of grim understanding. The forges of Asgard had failed. The strength of the gods had failed. There was only one place to turn. Svartalfheim, the realm of the dwarves, the dark elves. They were the master artisans, the subterranean smiths who lived in a world of darkness and craft. They did not just forge metal, they forged ideas. They could weave light, hammer sound, and shape magic into physical form. They will demand a high price, Loki warned, his initial amusement fading into a sly, negotiator's caution. The dwarves give nothing for free. Let them ask for the sun in the sky, Odin declared, his kingly resolve returning. It is a small price to pay for our survival. Loki, you are the Silverdom. You will go to the dwarves. Tell them we need a fetter. Not a chain of iron, but a fetter that cannot be broken. Tell them to forge us an impossibility. And so, Loki, the god of mischief, was dispatched on the most important errand of his life. He descended into the dark, winding, and sunless tunnels of Spurlfheim, a realm that smelled of cold iron and ancient dust. He found the dwarves in their deep forges, their faces lit by the eerie glow of magical fires. Loki was a master negotiator. He flattered, he lied, he bartered. He promised them riches. He promised them fame. He promised them a prize that would be the envy of all the 9 realms, though he conveniently left out what that prize might be. The dwarves, intrigued by the challenge, for they were, above all, craftsmen who loved an impossible task, agreed. They set to work, but they did not go to their piles of iron or gold. They went, instead, to their pantry of concepts. For a week, the gods in Asgard waited, the tension growing as Fenrir, outside their walls, continued to grow, fueled by their fear. Then Loki returned. He walked into the council hall, not with a massive, rattling chain, but with a small, wooden box. He placed it on the table. Thor snorted. "Is this a jest, brother? I hope you did not bring us back a necklace." Loki smiled his thin, dangerous smile and opened the box. Inside, coiled on a bed of velvet, was a single, silken ribbon. It was as thin as a strand of silk, as soft as velvet, and it seemed to absorb the light in the room, shimmering with a faint, gray glow. It looked like nothing. It looked weak. "This," Loki announced, his voice dripping with triumph, "is Gleipnir. It is the strongest, most unbreakable binding in all the 9 realms. The dwarves," he added with a flourish, "call it their masterpiece." "It is a ribbon," Thor stated, his confusion obvious. "Oh no, brother," Loki chuckled. "It is made of 6 very special things. It is forged from the sound of a cat's footfall, from the beard of a woman, from the roots of a mountain, from the sinews of a bear, from the breath of a fish, and from the spittle of a bird." The gods stared at the ribbon. A chain made of things that did not exist. A binding forged from impossibilities. "It is a chain of magic," as the god of law suggested, Loki said, his eyes finding tears. "It is a trick, a deceit, a conceptual cage for a conceptual beast." Odin looked at the silken ribbon. Then his gaze drifted to the window, toward the great, dark wolf that lay upon the plain. They now had their weapon. A weapon of lies, magic, and deceit. But the problem remained. Lingr had been a test of strength, and Fenrir had met it. But Gleipnir was a trick, and the wolf had already been tricked once. "He will not be fooled a second time," Tyr said, his voice flat. "He will not let us near him with another chain, especially not one that looks so weak. He will know it is a trap." "Then," Loki said, his smile vanishing, "one of us will have to convince him. One of us will have to prove that there is no trick, by offering collateral, a guarantee of good faith." A new, colder silence filled the room. The gods looked at the silken ribbon. They looked at each other, and one by one, their eyes settled on the only god the wolf had ever trusted. The only god who had never shown fear. The only god whose word was, itself, an unbreakable bond. Tyr, the god of justice, stood unmoving as he felt the weight of every god's gaze. He knew, in that moment, what this new, magical law would cost. And he knew, with chilling certainty, that he was the only one who could pay the price. The council hall of Gladsheim was a tomb of suffocating silence. The gods of Asgard, the supposed masters of the 9 realms, stared at the small, innocuous, gray ribbon coiled in its box. Gleipnir, a chain made of nothing, a weapon of lies. All eyes were on Tyr. He had not moved. He had not flinched. He stood as he always stood, a pillar of unshakable calm, as the collective weight of his civilization, his people, and his king bore down upon him. He was the god of oaths. And now, he was being asked to be the living seal on a profound act of deceit. Odin, the All-Father, did not give the order. He did not need to. This was not a command that could be given, only a sacrifice that could be offered. Thor looked at Tyr, his expression a storm of confusion, respect, and a shame so deep it turned his knuckles white on his hammer. He, the strongest, was useless here. Loki, the architect of this scheme, simply watched Tyr with a cold, academic curiosity, as a scientist might watch a subject in a painful experiment. Finally, Tyr spoke. His voice was not the voice of a martyr, nor of a man condemned. It was the voice of a judge, a man who has weighed all the evidence and come to the only possible, logical, and terrible conclusion. "We have no other way," he said, his words clear and final. "The law must be upheld. The public order of Asgard must be protected. This is the price. I will pay it." He did not say, "I will be the pledge." He said, "I will pay the price." He knew, with absolute clarity, exactly what he was agreeing to. He was not just the god of justice, he was its living embodiment. And the system he had built, the system he loved, was now demanding a piece of him as its toll. He closed the wooden box containing Gleipnir, his movements precise and deliberate. "Let us go. It is time to conclude this." For the third and final time, the gods walked to the plain of Ida. This time, there was no rattling chain, no army of gods. It was a small, somber delegation. Odin, Thor, Loki, and Tyr, who carried the small box. Fenrir was waiting. He was larger than he had been, his growth now truly terrifying. He was a creature of prophecy, and he could smell the fear radiating from the gods, a scent as potent as blood. He rose to his full, mountainous height, his black eyes burning with an intelligence that saw through all their masks. His voice was a rumble that shook the ground beneath their feet. "You come again, gods of as example. What is it this time? Another test of strength? Have you forged a chain of mountains for me to break?" Loki, ever the spokesman, slithered forward, holding up the small box. "We have, in fact, given up, great Fenrir. Your strength is, as you have proven, absolute. We have no chain that can hold you." Fenrir tilted his head, a low growl beginning in his chest. "Then why are you here, trickster?" "A final game," Loki said, his voice slick and sweet. He opened the box to reveal the thin, silken ribbon. "We have a novelty, a trinket from the dwarves. They claim this ribbon, as a feat of their craft, cannot be broken. We find it laughable. We wish for you, the mightiest being, to do us the honor of snapping it, so we may mock the dwarves for their failed magic." The wolf looked at the ribbon. Then he looked at the gods. He laughed, a horrifying sound like 1,000 graves opening at once. "A ribbon," he growled. "You broke the greatest chain in Asgard. And you, the masters of the lie, bring me a ribbon?" He fixed his gaze on Loki. "I can smell the deceit on you, son of giants. I can smell the magic woven into this thread. It is thin, so it must be strong. It is soft, so it must be a trap. No, I will not be your fool a second time." The plan had failed. The gods stood frozen. Loki's smile wavered, his words useless. Thor gripped his hammer, but he knew it was a hollow gesture. However, Fenrir's voice dropped, his gaze leaving Loki and fastening, with piercing intensity, onto the one god who had never lied to him. I see a different story in his eyes. The beast's massive head lowered, his snout coming to rest only yards from Tyr. "You, the lawgiver, the one who brought me food, the one who spoke to me with a straight tongue. You are with them. You are part of this game." Tyr met the gaze. "I am." The wolf was silent for a long moment. I will consent to this test," Fenrir said slowly, his cunning mind seeing a path. "I will allow you to bind me with this magical trick, but not for free. Your words are hollow. I require a pledge, a guarantee of your good faith." "What pledge?" Odin asked, his voice strained. Fenrir smiled, a terrible sight, as his black lips peeled back to reveal rows of teeth, each the size of a man. "A pledge I can hold, a promise I can keep. If this ribbon proves to be a trick, if you do not release me, then I will exact my payment. One of you, one of the Aesir, will place their hand in my mouth." A wave of absolute terror rolled through the gods. Thor took an involuntary step back. Loki turned pale. This was the price. The wolf had named it. "Place your hand in my mouth," Fenrir repeated, his voice a silky, deadly growl as he opened his cavernous jaws, revealing the dark, wet cavern of his throat. "As collateral, if I am freed, the hand is returned. If I am tricked, I keep it." That seems like a fair and lawful agreement, does it not? A contract. The gods were silent. No one moved. They were caught in their own lie, trapped by the beast's brutal, perfect logic. And into that silence, Tyr, the god of justice, stepped forward. He did not look at Odin for permission. He did not look at Thor for support. His eyes were fixed on the wolf, on the contract that had been offered. It was a terrible, binding oath, and Tyr was the god of oaths. He could not let it pass. "The pledge is fair," Tyr said, his voice clear. He began to unbuckle his sword belt. He methodically unstrapped the vambrace from his right arm. His sword hand, the hand he used to wield his blade, the hand he used to raise in the air to ratify a judgment at the thing. It was the symbol of his power, his authority, and his honor. "Tyr, no," Thor whispered, but his voice was weak. Tyr ignored him. He stood before the monstrous, open maw. He looked at the teeth, a forest of white daggers. He was the only man in Asgard who did not fear the wolf. And the wolf, in that moment, trusted the only man who was not afraid of him. It was a perfect, terrible paradox. "I will be the pledge, Fenrir," Tyr declared, his voice ringing with the authority of a high priest at an altar. Tyr, god of justice and the sworn oath, place my hand in your keeping as a guarantee of the good faith of Asgard." And then, before any other god could speak or act, Tyr, the two-handed god, the champion of law, thrust his right arm deep into the wolf's mouth, placing his hand, his wrist, and half his forearm on the beast's massive tongue. The wolf's breath was hot, smelling of ancient hunger. The teeth, sharp as razors, rested gently, promisingly, against his skin. "The pledge is made." Fenrir's voice was a deep vibration. "The contract is sealed." His eyes, burning with a cold fire, fixed on the other gods. "Now, bind me." The world, for a moment, seemed to stop. The wind ceased to blow across the plain of Ida. The very air grew thick, electrified by the terrible, silent contract that had just been sealed. Tyr stood, rigid and unmoving, his right arm buried to the elbow in the hot, dark cavern of the wolf's mouth. The row of teeth, each a dagger, rested against his flesh, a promise of payment held in check. Fenrir's black eyes were locked on Tyr's. This was a sacrament of two opposing faiths. The beast of chaos was held in check by the pure, unadulterated honor of the god of law. Odin, his one eye wide, gave a sharp, almost imperceptible nod. It was Loki and Thor who moved, their actions hurried and clumsy with fear. They scrambled forward with Gleipnir, the thin, gray ribbon that looked like a joke. The wolf did not move, his entire being focused on the living pledge in his mouth. With fumbling, trembling hands, the gods wrapped the silken fetter around the wolf's thick forelegs. They wound it around his neck, coiling it over his massive, heaving chest. The ribbon felt soft, almost warm, to the touch. It seemed impossible that it could hold a child, let alone the doom of the gods. "It is done," Loki whispered, his voice cracking as he tied the final, simple knot. The two gods scrambled back, putting a safe distance between themselves and the beast, joining the silent, watchful Odin. Only Tyr remained, bound to the beast by his own terrible oath. The wolf's eyes, burning with a cold, ancient intelligence, shifted from Tyr to the other gods, then down to the silken ribbon on his chest. It looked pathetic. "A simple game," Fenrir rumbled, his voice vibrating Tyr's arm. "Now, as per our agreement, I will test this ribbon. And when it snaps, as it will, you will unbind me, and I will return your pledge." Tyr said nothing. His face was a mask of pale, resolute stone. Fenrir tensed. He gathered his colossal strength, the muscles in his shoulders and haunches coiling like massive springs. He prepared to stand, to shatter this final, insulting trinket as he had shattered Lingr, the greatest chain of Asgard. He pushed, and nothing happened. Gleipnir, the ribbon made of impossibilities, did not break. It did not shatter. It did not even strain. It held. A look of confusion, a shadow of doubt, crossed the wolf's face. He pushed again, harder, driving his legs against the very bedrock of Asgard. He unleashed a fraction of his true, chaotic power. The ribbon stretched. It became taut, pulling thin as a spider's web, glowing with a faint, magical, gray light. And then it held. The wolf growled, a low, deep sound of rising panic. This was wrong. He stood up, throwing his full weight into the fetter. He thrashed. He pulled. He roared, a sound of pure fury that split the clouds above. The ground of Ida cracked and split under the force of his struggle, but the ribbon held. And worse, it tightened. With every pull, with every desperate surge of strength, the magical ribbon constricted. It bit into his fur, then his flesh. Where Linger had been a wall he could shatter, Gleipnir was a trap he could not escape. The more he fought it, the more he bound himself. The harder he pulled, the deeper the impossible threads cut. He stopped, his massive chest heaving, his breath coming in ragged, fiery gasps. He looked down at the ribbon, now drawing blood from his legs and neck. He looked at the gods, who stood watching, their faces a mixture of terror, relief, and a dark, triumphant shame. He saw Loki's thin, victorious smile. He had been tricked. The game was a lie. The test was a lie. The oath of Asgard's good faith was a lie. He, Fenrir, the son of chaos, the fated end, had been captured. Not by strength, but by deceit. Not by warriors, but by liars. He slowly, terribly, turned his massive head. His burning, hate-filled eyes, now rimmed with the red of his own blood, found Tyr. Tyr, the god of justice. Tyr, the only one he had trusted. Tyr, the anchor of this entire, monstrous betrayal. The wolf's gaze was no longer cunning. It was pure, absolute, and righteous in its rage. Tyr had been the tool of the lie. Tyr, the god of oaths, had stood as guarantor for a broken promise. A new, different law was about to be executed. The law of the broken contract. The law of the forfeit pledge. Tyr met the wolf's gaze. He did not beg. He did not flinch. He did not try to pull his arm free. He had made his choice. He had sacrificed his integrity to save his people. And now he would pay the price for that choice. He closed his eyes. Fenrir enacted the only justice left to him. There was no tearing. There was no struggle. There was only a single, final, definitive sound. The sound of a mountain-sized guillotine. A sharp, wet, sickening crunch of 1,000 daggers closing at once, shearing through muscle, sinew, and bone. Tyr's body jerked in a single, violent spasm. He did not scream. A muffled, choked sound, a grunt of agony forced from his lungs, was the only noise he made. The wolf's jaws ground shut. The gods cried out in horror. Thor raised his hammer, as if to strike, but it was too late. Tyr stumbled back, falling to one knee. He was free. He stared, his face ashen, at the place where his right hand had been. His arm now ended in a shredded, gushing ruin just below the elbow. God blood, golden and crimson, pumped onto the golden grass of Asgard, staining it. He looked at his wound, not in horror, but with a strange, detached finality. The price had been paid. The contract was complete. He then looked up. He raised his left hand, his only hand, and slowly, deliberately, clutched the bleeding stump, stemming the flow. He rose to his feet. He stood tall. Fenrir, bound and betrayed, threw his head back and howled. It was not a howl of anger, but a sound of pure, bottomless despair and hatred that would echo in the gods' nightmares until the end of days. The gods, their victory now tasting like ash, surged forward. They dragged the bound and roaring wolf to a great cavern, deep in the earth, far from the light of Asgard. They took the end of Gleipnir and bound it to a great stone, named Joel, which they rooted a mile deep into the planet's core. Fenrir snapped and thrashed, his hatred now focused on all of them. To silence his terrible curses and his howls of prophecy, they jammed a great sword into his mouth, the hilt in the lower jaw, the point in the upper, forcing his jaws eternally open. From his open, drooling maw, a river of foam began to flow, a river that would be known in the mortal world as Van. Their enemy was contained. Asgard was safe. The prophecy was delayed. The gods left him there, in the dark, in the cold, bound by a lie. They returned to the Golden City, their faces grim, their victory silent. And walking with them, his head held high, his gait steady, was Tyr. He was the god of justice. He was the savior of Asgard. And he was, from that day forth, the one-handed god. Victory is a strange and bitter feast. The gods returned to the golden halls of Asgard, but there was no celebration. There were no songs of triumph sung in Valhalla. There was no boasting. How could they boast? They had not won by strength, or by courage, or by the merits of their law. They had won by a lie, and the price of that lie now walked among them, bleeding. Tyr was taken, not to his own hall, but to Bilskirnir, the Hall of Air, the goddess of healing. His wound was catastrophic. Even for a god, the trauma was profound. The blood flow was stopped, the wound cauterized not by fire, but by air's quiet magic, which hummed like a sad song. The flesh was sealed, the bones smoothed, but the hand was gone. Air worked in silence, her face a mask of professional sorrow. The other gods stood at the door, awkward and full of a new, unfamiliar shame. Thor, the mighty, the fearless, could not bring himself to enter the room. He, who had faced down giants and monsters, could not face the god who had paid the price his own strength could not cover. He stood outside, his great shoulders slumped, listening to the silence. Odin entered. The Allfather, the king, looked at Tyr, who sat on the table, his face pale but his back straight. His right arm was now a neatly sealed stump, a permanent symbol of a broken oath and a saved kingdom. "You have the gratitude of Asgard," Odin said. His voice was not cold, but it was distant, the voice of a king who has just made a necessary, terrible move in a cosmic game. Tyr looked down at his new, abbreviated limb. He tried, out of instinct, to flex the fingers that were no longer there. A sharp, bright, phantom pain shot up his arm, a ghostly echo of the hand he had lost. "Gratitude," Tyr repeated, his voice quiet, hoarse. "It was not for gratitude, Allfather. It was for procedure. The contract was offered. The pledge was named. And you paid it," Odin said, his one eye seeming to see too much. "You, the god of law, were the only one who could have fulfilled the terms of a lie. It is a terrible paradox." "There is no paradox," Tyr said, looking up. His eyes were not filled with despair. They were not filled with anger. They were empty. They were the eyes of a man who had stared into the heart of his faith and found a void. The law is a system. The system required a sacrifice. The sacrifice was made. The system is preserved. Asgard is safe. Odin nodded, a slow, profound gesture. He had nothing more to say. The most pragmatic god in Asgard, the god of sacrifice, was looking at his own equal. He turned and left. For days, Tyr remained in that hall, not just healing, but adjusting. He had to learn, as a child does, to live in the world again. He had to learn to tie his boots with one hand. He had to learn to lift a cup, to buckle his armor, to balance himself, now that a part of him was missing. The phantom pain was his constant companion. He would wake in the night, his mind screaming that his hand was being crushed, that he could feel the wolf's teeth grinding on his bones. He would sit up in the dark, clutching the stump, breathing through the spectral agony, until the wave passed. He was not just the god of justice. He was now the god of the consequence of justice. Finally, he emerged. He walked out into the golden light of Asgard. He was dressed in his armor, his left hand resting on the hilt of his sword, which he had now belted on his right hip. The right sleeve of his tunic was empty, tied neatly at the end. The other gods, they did not know how to act. Loki watched him from a balcony, a look of purely scientific curiosity on his face. What does a god do, his eyes seemed to ask, when his entire identity is mutilated? Thor saw him and, for the first time, did not greet him with a booming laugh. He simply raised his cup of mead in a silent, shame-faced toast and looked away. But the work of Asgard does not stop for the wounds of its gods. A week after the binding, the thing was called to session. The Great Assembly, Tyr's domain. A dispute had arisen. Two of the lesser gods, a husband and wife, were arguing over a land deed. It was a petty, simple matter, the kind Tyr had solved 1,000 times. He walked to the high seat of the judge, his steps steady. The assembly hall, usually loud with argument and debate, fell utterly silent. Every eye was on him, on his empty sleeve. The two bickering gods, their faces red, suddenly stopped. Their own argument seemed pathetic, small, in the face of the god who stood before them. Tyr took a seat. He looked at the plaintiffs, at the evidence, at the assembly of his peers. He saw the pity in their eyes. He saw the awe. He saw the guilt. He had always been the god of law, a symbol of abstract order. But now he was something more. He was no longer just the idea of justice. He was the cost of it. He was the living, breathing, one-handed proof that the law is not a game, that oaths have weight, and that to preserve order, there is, sometimes, a price that must be paid in blood and bone. He looked at the two gods. "State your case," he said. His voice was the same. His logic was as sharp as it had ever been. But the authority was absolute. It was profound. He raised his left hand, his only hand, to call for order. And for the first time, in the history of Asgard, there was perfect, immediate, and terrified silence. Tyr, the god of justice, was broken. And in being broken, he had become, at last, unbreakable. The silence that followed the binding of Fenrir was, in its own way, as loud as the wolf's roars had been. Asgard, the golden city, had saved itself, but it had lost its innocence. The gods had been willing to lie, to cheat, and to sacrifice one of their own to maintain their power. And the evidence of that choice sat at every council meeting, walked in every hall, and judged every dispute with a new, cold clarity. Tyr was no longer just the god of law. He was a living scar. The revelry of Valhalla returned, as it always did. The ale flowed, the boasts grew louder, and the songs of heroes were sung. But it was a forced joy, a desperate attempt to drown out the memory of that day on the plain of Ida. And at the center of this forced merriment sat a profound, empty space. The gods, especially the warriors, tried to bring Tyr back into their fold. They saw his sacrifice as a warrior's deed, the greatest of all. To them, a lost hand was a badge of honor, a story to be told over mead. One night, Thor, his face flushed with drink and his heart heavy with a guilt he couldn't articulate, approached Tyr. The one-handed god was sitting not at the high table, but near the fire, staring into the flames, his left hand, his only hand, curled around a simple cup. "Brother," Thor boomed, his voice a little too loud, his smile a little too wide. He slung his massive arm around Tyr's shoulders, a gesture that almost unbalanced the seated god. "Why do you sit here in the shadows? Come. We are singing of your deed, the greatest act of bravery in Asgard's history, the tale of the wolf's pledge." Tyr did not move. He did not look up. He simply stared into the fire, his presence a void that seemed to drink the warmth and light from the room. "They are singing," Tyr said, his voice flat, "of a lie." Thor's smile faltered. He pulled back, confused. "A lie? It was a glorious trick. We fooled the beast. We saved the 9 realms. You saved us. It was honor." Finally, Tyr turned his head. He looked up at his brother in arms. And the look in Tyr's eyes was not one of a shared victory. It was not anger. It was not sadness. It was a cold, distant, and utterly empty comprehension. It was the look of a man who had seen the foundations of the world and found them to be rotten. "Honor." Tyr's voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise of the hall like a blade. "Tell me, brother, what part of it was honorable? Was it the part where we broke our king's invitation of safe passage? Was it the part where we built 2 chains, knowing they would fail, to set the stage for a third? Was it the part where we used a magical trick, a lie, to bind a creature that had, as yet, committed no crime save the one we prophesied he would?" Thor recoiled as if struck. But the prophecy. He would have destroyed us. He would have eaten the sun. He would have killed the All-Father. He would have, Tyr repeated, the words hanging in the air. "We punished him for a crime he had not yet committed. We broke our own laws to preserve our order." And to seal the lie, the god of oaths was forced to break the most sacred vow of all, a pledge of good faith. He held up his right arm, the neatly sealed stump, the empty sleeve. "This," he said, "is not a badge of honor, Thor. It is a mark of shame. It is the receipt for Asgard's hypocrisy. It is the price I paid for my own foolish belief that the law was pure. I believed the system was incorruptible." He looked at his stump, a flicker of the old phantom pain crossing his features. "Now, I know the truth. The law is not a divine, perfect thing. It is a wall, a desperate, ugly, necessary wall that we build to keep out the chaos. And to build it, we must sometimes use compromised materials. We must use lies. We must use deceit. We must use me." Thor was speechless. This was a level of thought, a depth of cold philosophy, that his hammer-wielding mind could not grasp. He dealt in good and evil, in strength and weakness. This was something else. This was the gray, sickening truth of survival. "You are no fun anymore, Tyr," Thor muttered, but there was no heat in it. It was a defeated statement. "No," Tyr agreed, turning back to the fire. "I am not. The part of me that was fun, the part that believed in the simple, clean lines of justice. I left that part of me in the mouth of the wolf." He picked up his cup with his left hand. "Go, brother. Drink your mead. Sing your songs of honor. Your world is simple. I envy you, but do not call me a hero. I am a judge, and I, more than anyone, know the exact, terrible cost of the verdict. Thor stared at him, at this stranger who wore his brother's face. He wanted to argue, he wanted to fight, but he could not. There was no enemy here to strike, only a truth he did not wish to see. He turned, his shoulders slumped, and walked away, leaving Tyr alone by the fire. The music in the hall seemed tinny and false. Tyr, the one-handed god, watched him go. He was the most respected god in Asgard. He was the most feared god in Asgard. And he was, in that moment, the most profoundly, utterly alone being in all the 9 realms. His old faith was dead, shattered. In its place was a new, cold, and terrible purpose. He would uphold the law, not because it was good, but because it was necessary. And he would be the one to pay its price, because he was the only one who could. Asgard's new order was a brittle, fragile thing. The gods had locked away their greatest fear, but in doing so, they had unleashed something else within their own walls, the quiet, chilling authority of a god who no longer believed in anything but the letter of the law. Tyr's transformation was complete. He was the most effective judge in the 9 realms, because he was now a being without mercy, driven only by a cold, pragmatic calculus of justice. And it was not long before this new authority was put to a test that involved the very source of all their troubles, Loki. Loki, ever the agent of chaos, had grown bored with the grim, joyless peace of Asgard. He missed the tension, the fear, the high-stakes games. And in his boredom, he decided to play a prank. His target was Sif, the wife of Thor. Sif was known for her glorious, golden hair, which flowed like a field of living wheat and was the pride of Asgard and the envy of Thor. While she slept in her garden, Loki, with a magical, silent blade, sheared it all off. He stole her glory, leaving her bald, weeping, and shamed. When Thor discovered what had happened, his roar of rage was a storm that shattered the windows of his great hall, Bilskirnir. This was not a dispute over land or property. This was a profound, personal, and unforgivable insult. He found Loki celebrating in the great hall, holding up Sif's shorn, golden hair like a trophy. Thor seized the trickster, his hand crackling with lightning, ready to crush Loki's skull. "You have gone too far, brother," Thor bellowed, his voice shaking the foundations of the city. "This is not a prank. This is a crime. And I will have your life for it." It was a joke. Loki shrieked, his face pale with genuine fear as Thor's grip tightened. "It will grow back. It's just hair." It was her honor. "And you will pay with your head." The hall fell silent. The gods gathered, watching. Odin, on his high throne, looked weary. This was the exact kind of internal, chaotic strife that could tear Asgard apart. He needed to stop it, but his son's rage was a force of nature. "He will be tried," Thor roared, dragging Loki by the neck. "He will be tried by the thing, and the verdict will be death." And so, for the second time in recent memory, the Great Assembly was called. But this was not a debate over a distant threat. It was a trial for the life of a god. Thor, consumed by a righteous fury, threw Loki to the floor at the center of the hall. He stood, Mjolnir in hand, acting as accuser and, in his mind, executioner. "He has defiled my wife. He has attacked my house. I demand his life, by all the laws of Asgard." Loki, for his part, was trying to use his silver tongue. It was a simple jest, a bit of harmless fun. Are we all so grim now that we cannot take a joke? Thor is overreacting. Tell him, gods, tell him. The assembly was divided. Some, who had long suffered Loki's mischief, nodded in agreement with Thor. Others, including Odin, knew that to kill Loki, a god, a blood brother, would be a stain on Asgard. They looked for mediation. They looked for a compromise. And then every eye turned to the high seat, to Tyr. The one-handed god had watched the entire proceeding with a terrifying, detached calm. He had looked at Thor's rage and at Loki's pathetic, lying fear, and his expression had not changed. He was the law. He was the judge. He rose slowly. His left hand, his only hand, rested on the arm of his chair. His right, the empty sleeve, was a stark reminder of the cost of order. Thor, son of Odin. Tyr's voice was not loud, but it filled the hall, silencing all other sound. "You demand a life. The law of retribution. An eye for an eye." But Loki did not take Sif's life. He took her hair. "The law is not about your rage. It is about balance. Vengeance is chaos. Justice is restoration." Thor opened his mouth to argue, but Tyr cut him off, his gaze as hard as iron. "Your rage does not interest me, brother. Only the law." He then turned his cold gaze upon Loki, who was still crumpled on the floor. Tyr, perhaps more than any god, now understood the mind of a liar. He had been the ultimate victim of a trick. He could see through Loki's pleas as if they were glass. "Loki, son of Farbati," Tyr said, his voice dropping. "You call this a joke. You claim it was harmless. You are a fool and a liar. You breached the peace. You violated the sanctity of another's house. You stole property. The intent is irrelevant. The consequence is absolute. The debt will be paid." Loki, seeing no pity in those eyes, began to babble. "I will apologize. I will give her gold. 1,000 bars of gold. Gold cannot be worn," Tyr said, his voice flat. "An apology does not cover her head. The balance is not restored. The law demands restitution. You will not pay with your life, Loki. You will pay with your skill." Tyr raised his left hand, the gesture silencing the room. "This is the judgment. You will restore Sif's hair. You will go to the dwarves, to the master smiths of Svartalfheim, whose craft you so admire, and you will have them forge Sif a new head of hair. Not a wig, not a helmet, but a head of hair of pure, magical gold that will grow as her own hair did and be as glorious, if not more so." He paused, letting the judgment sink in. "And Loki," Tyr added, his voice dropping to a near whisper, "you will ensure that they do it, or you will do it yourself. If you return to this hall, to Asgard, without Sif's new hair, then Thor will have his payment. And I, the god of law, will personally hand him your head. The debt will be paid. That is the law." The hall was stunned. It was a brilliant, cold, and perfect judgment. It was not merciful. It was not cruel. It was balanced. It saved Loki's life, but it bound him to a terrible, difficult task. It satisfied Thor's need for justice, if not his need for blood. It restored what was broken. Loki, seeing the absolute, unbending finality in Tyr's eyes, the same finality that had once thrust a hand into a wolf's mouth, knew he could not talk his way out of this. He had no choice. Thor, after a moment, lowered his hammer. His rage was still there, but it was now secondary to the cold, undeniable rightness of the verdict. Tyr, his work done, sat back down. He was the law, and the law, in his one capable hand, was now the single most powerful and most feared thing in Asgard. The seasons of Asgard turned. The new, cold peace, brokered by Tyr's unyielding judgment, held the city in a state of suspended animation. The gods were, for the first time, afraid of their own laws. They were afraid of the one-handed god who enforced them, the god who had sacrificed his hand and, with it, his capacity for compromise. And then, as he always did, Loki returned. He arrived not with a quiet apology, but with a typical, chaotic flourish. He rode into the great hall, his arms laden with treasures, a triumphant, deceitful grin plastered on his face. He presented Sif with her new hair, a marvel of dwarven craft, spun from pure, living gold, which, when placed upon her head, immediately took root and flowed down her back, more radiant than her original hair had ever been. Thor, his rage satisfied, looked almost pleased. The debt had been paid. The balance, as Tyr had decreed, was restored. Loki, basking in the attention, then presented other gifts. To Odin, he gave the great spear Gungnir, which never missed its mark. To Freyr, a ship called Skidbladnir, which could fold up to fit in a pocket, but was large enough to hold all the gods. He had, it seemed, more than fulfilled his task. But the celebration was cut short. No sooner had Loki presented his gifts than two others stormed into the hall, their faces dark with soot and rage. They were not the dwarves Loki had originally commissioned. These were Brakr and Sindri, two of the most grim and unyielding craftsmen in all of Svartalfheim. "He has not paid," Brak, the stockier of the two, shouted, his voice a gravelly echo in the great hall. He pointed a thick, soot-stained finger at Loki. Loki's smile vanished, replaced by a look of pale, hunted fear. "This is not my business. This is a simple misunderstanding." "There is no misunderstanding, trickster," Sindri hissed, his brother at his side. "We come before the gods of Asgard. We come before the god of law. We come for payment, as per our contract." The hall fell silent. The word contract had a new, terrible weight in Asgard. All eyes, as one, turned to Tyr, who sat at the high table, his one hand resting beside a cup of mead. Tyr looked at the dwarves, his expression unreadable. "A contract," he stated. "Explain." Brokkr, with the unassailable righteousness of a wronged craftsman, stepped forward. He told the entire story. He explained how Loki, in his arrogance, had come to them after commissioning the first gifts, how he had mocked them and bet them that they, Brokkr and Sindri, could not possibly create 3 treasures equal to the first. And what, Tyr asked, his voice cutting through the dwarf's speech, was the wager? What was the price? It was Loki who spoke, his voice a thin, desperate whisper. It was a trifle, a foolishness, a game of words. He bet his head. Brokkr roared, silencing Loki. He wagered his own, lying head that we would fail, and we did not. The dwarf then unveiled his own masterpieces. He presented Odin with the ring Draupnir, which would multiply itself, dropping 8 identical gold rings every 9th night. He gave Freyr the golden bristled boar, Gullinbursti, which could run faster than any horse, through air or over sea. And finally, Brokkr said, his voice dropping with pride, to Thor, he and his brother, with a great heave, placed the final gift on the stone floor. It was a hammer, short-hafted, unadorned, but pulsing with a power that made the air crackle. "Mjolnir," the dwarf said. "It will never break. It will never miss its target. And it will always return to its master's hand." Thor, as if in a trance, stepped forward. He reached down, and his hand closed around the hammer's leather-wrapped grip. It was a perfect fit. A surge of lightning, pure and joyful, leapt from the hammer to his arm, and a great, booming peal of thunder echoed over Asgard. Thor laughed, a real, true laugh of a warrior who has just found his soulmate in the form of a weapon. "The gods judged our gifts," Brokkr continued, his gaze returning to Tyr. "They judged them to be the greatest. We won the wager. The contract is binding. We are here, God of Justice, to collect our payment. We are here for Loki's head." The silence in the hall was absolute. Thor's laugh died in his throat. Even Odin looked trapped. The law was, for the second time, pointing a dagger at Asgard's own throat. Loki was a liar. He was a thief. He was a menace. But he was also one of them. He was Odin's blood brother. He was Thor's, of a sort. To execute him, to allow these dwarves to cut off his head in the center of their hall, it was unthinkable. But the law, the contract, it was clear. Loki, now truly terrified, scrambled across the floor, not to Odin, not to Thor, but to Tyr. He fell at the feet of the one-handed god, clutching at his robes. "My lord Tyr, great judge, you cannot let them do this." It was a jest, a simple turn of phrase. "You are the god of law, yes, but you are also the god of reason. This is not reasonable." The 2 dwarves, Brokkr and Sindri, merely crossed their arms. Their case was made. They did not need to argue. They just waited for the law to be enforced. Tyr, the god of justice, looked down at the pathetic, groveling god of lies at his feet. He looked at the grim, resolute dwarves who had come seeking not mercy, but simple, cold payment. He looked at Odin, his king, who was trapped by his own blood oath. He looked at Thor, who was trapped by his love for his new, perfect weapon. And Tyr, the man who had lost his hand to uphold a false oath, was now being asked to take a god's life to uphold a true one. He rose slowly to his feet, his shadow falling over the trembling Loki. The hall held its breath. The judgment was at hand. The great hall of Asgard, Gladsheim, was as silent as a tomb. In the center, 2 dwarves stood, grim and resolute, their hands on the knives at their belts. Before them, a god, Loki, the silver-tongued, groveled on the stone floor. And on the high seat, the god of law, Tyr, looked down upon them all. The fate of a god hung in the balance, trapped in the precise wording of a contract. Loki, his face slick with sweat and tears of true terror, clutched at Tyr's robes. My lord, it was a wager. A game, not a binding oath of life and death. You cannot let them murder me in cold blood. That is not justice, it is bad business." Tyr looked down at Loki, his face a mask of cold granite. There was no pity in his eyes. There was no mercy. There was only the law. He, more than anyone living or dead, knew the cost of a binding oath. He, more than anyone, knew what it was to pay an unpayable price. You wagered, Loki. Tyr's voice was flat, cutting through the silence. You lost. The dwarves delivered on their promise. You must deliver on yours. The law is not a game. It is not business. It is a fact. The contract is valid. No, Loki shrieked. Yes, Tyr said. He looked at the dwarves. Brakr, Sindri, you have won your wager. The gods of Asgard have accepted your gifts. The law is on your side. The price is Loki's head. You may take what you are owed. A collective gasp swept the hall. Odin closed his one eye, pained. Thor looked at Mjolnir in his hand, the hammer that had just been given to him, and felt a sudden, sickening wave of guilt. He had wanted Loki punished, yes. But this? Brakr, his face a mask of grim satisfaction, drew a long, sharp knife from his belt. At last, he growled. A god who understands the sanctity of a craftsman's contract. He and Sindri moved forward, grabbing Loki by his hair, forcing his head back to expose his throat. Loki thrashed and screamed, his pleas turning to high-pitched, incoherent wails of panic. No, wait. Loki shrieked, his eyes wide with a final, brilliant spark of desperate, rat-like cunning. Wait. Stop. The contract. The words. The dwarves paused, the knife just an inch from Loki's skin. What of the words? Brakr snarled. The wager was your head. Yes. Loki screamed, his voice cracking. My head. You are right. You have won my head. I wagered my head, and you can have it. But he turned his terrified eyes back to Tyr. But I did not wager my neck. Did I? The contract mentioned only my head, not my throat, not my neck. You cannot cut my neck. To take the head, you must cut the neck, and the neck is mine. It was not part of the agreement. The hall was stunned. The dwarves froze, their faces a perfect picture of stunned, furious confusion. They looked at each other. Then they looked at Tyr. Thor actually let out a short, incredulous bark of a laugh, which he quickly stifled. Tyr, the god of law, did not move. His expression did not change. He had been presented with a new legal argument, a loophole, a desperate, slimy, but perhaps valid interpretation of the contract's literal, precise wording. He stared at Loki for a long, cold moment. He was not amused. He was not impressed. He was a judge considering a new piece of evidence. Brakr, Tyr said, his voice quiet. State the terms of the agreement, as they were spoken. The dwarf stammered, his rage making him shake. He wagered his head. That was the word. His head. And only his head? Tyr pressed, his voice like a scalpel. Was the neck included in the collateral? Was it mentioned in any addendum? Was it part of the verbal agreement that I am now being asked to enforce? Brakr's face turned purple. No. But that is, you cannot, it is implied. The law is not about what is implied, Tyr said, the words echoing with a terrible, final authority. The law is about what is written, what is spoken, what is agreed. The law must be precise. I, of all gods, know this. He turned his gaze back to Loki, who was sobbing with relief. The trickster's argument is valid. The contract is for his head, and his head only. You may not, by the letter of the law, damage or take his neck in the process of retrieval. As this is physically impossible, the contract for his life is hereby rendered null. You may not kill him. Loki collapsed, a weeping, laughing puddle on the floor. Thor let out a great sigh of relief, patting Mjolnir. Odin opened his eye, but the dwarves were trembling with a rage that was almost holy. Cheated, Brakr roared, stomping his foot. Cheated by a trick of words in the very hall of law. This is no justice. This is a mockery. He lied. He cheated. He swore an oath and then broke it, and he lives. The dwarf's furious, righteous gaze fell on Tyr's empty sleeve. And you, god of oaths, you let him do this. After what that other oathbreaker did to you. The hall froze. No one had ever spoken of Tyr's hand. Tyr did not move. He simply looked at the dwarf, and the last shred of warmth left his eyes. You are correct, he said, his voice a whisper of ice. He is an oathbreaker. He is a liar. He is a mocker. He has been saved from death by a trick of the tongue. He looked down at Loki. The law's balance has not yet been restored. He does not forfeit his life, but his offense must be answered. He has used his words as a weapon to break a sacred vow. He has polluted this hall with his lies. Tyr looked back at the furious dwarves. You may not have his head, but you shall have his silence. His lying mouth is forfeit. The law finds this to be a balanced and just retribution." Loki's eyes went wide again, this time in a new, different kind of terror. "What? No. My lord, no. Tyr gave a single, curt nod. "Take his mouth." Before Loki could scramble away, Braker and Sindri, their faces lit with a grim, cruel, and justified fury, fell upon him. This, they understood. This was a craftsman's justice. They pinned the god, and Braker, with his free hand, produced a leather thong and a sharp, pointed awl. Loki thrashed and screamed, but Thor and the other gods, their faces pale, turned away. This was the law. This was Tyr's judgment. Loki's screams were suddenly muffled as the dwarves clamped his jaws shut. A sickening, wet, tearing sound echoed in the silent hall. The dwarves had sewed Loki's mouth shut. The great hall of Gladsheim, which had heard so many lies and boasts, was now filled with a sound it had never heard before. The muffled, wet, and utterly desperate screams of a god who could not open his mouth. Loki thrashed on the stone floor, his hands clawing at his face, his eyes wide and streaming with tears of agony and humiliation. The leather thongs, crudely and tightly sewn by dwarven hands, pierced his lips, pulling them shut in a grotesque, bloody grimace. He was silenced. His silver tongue, the weapon he had used to topple kingdoms and trick gods, was now his prison. Braker and Sindri stood over him, their work complete. Their faces were not triumphant. They were the faces of craftsmen who had been paid, albeit in a different currency than they had expected. "The debt is settled," Brock *KR growled, wiping the awl on his leather apron. He gave a curt, formal nod. Not of friendship, but of legal acknowledgement, to Tyr. The one-handed god simply nodded back. Once. The dwarves gathered their tools and, without another word to the gods of Asgard, turned and marched out of the hall. They had their justice. As the great doors boomed shut, the gods were left alone with the fruit of their judgment. Loki, their kinsman, their blood brother, their betrayer, was writhing at their feet, choking on his own blood and screams. It was a horrifying sight. Freya, the goddess of love, turned away, her face pale. Balder, the god of light, looked ill. Even Thor, who had wanted Loki's head only moments before, looked down at his new hammer, Mjolnir, with a sense of profound unease. The price of this perfect weapon, and of this perfect, cold justice, was the scene before him. No one moved to help Loki. Who would dare? To interfere would be to question the judgment of Tyr. It would be to stand against the law. And no one, not even Thor, had the courage to do that. Loki, realizing no help would come from his family, finally found a new surge of desperate, animalistic strength. He let out one last, terrible, muffled roar. With his own fingernails, he clawed at his face. He tore at the leather thongs, ripping his own flesh, tearing the stitches from his lips in a spray of blood. With a final, agonizing rip, he tore his mouth open. He collapsed, panting, a broken, bleeding, and weeping mess on the floor. He looked up, his eyes burning with a new and different hatred, finding Tyr. It was not the hatred of a rival. It was the absolute, bottomless hatred of a creature that has been perfectly and justly broken. He said nothing. He couldn't say anything. His mouth was a ruined, swollen mass. Slowly, painfully, Loki scrambled to his feet. He spat a wad of blood and broken leather onto the stone floor of Gladsheim. Then, clutching his ruined face, he fled. He ran from the hall, not as a god, not as a trickster, but as a whipped, beaten animal. He vanished from Asgard, seeking some dark hole in the 9 realms to hide in, to heal, and to plot. A new, cold, and terrible silence settled over the hall. The gods stood, not in celebration, but in a kind of shared, fearful shock. Tyr, the god of justice, merely looked down at the pool of Loki's blood and spittle on the floor. To him, this was not a tragedy. It was not a victory. It was an administrative detail. It was the messy, unpleasant, but necessary aftermath of balancing the scales. The law had been flouted. The law had been upheld. The case was closed. He turned, his empty right sleeve a counterweight to the left hand that had just passed sentence. He walked from the hall, his step steady, his back straight. From that day on, Asgard was different. The Golden City was now run, in effect, by 2 kings. There was Odin, the All-Father, the king of wisdom, magic, and secrets, who looked out at the future. And there was Tyr, the one-handed, the king of consequence, who looked only at the present. The gods learned very quickly the new rules. You did not break a promise. You did not fudge a contract. You did not tell a lie in the court of the thing, because the judge was no longer a philosopher. He was an executioner of the law's literal word. Tyr, who had lost his faith in the spirit of the law when his hand was taken, had become the living embodiment of its letter. And the letter, he had found, was a far more terrifying, far more effective, and far more brutal weapon than any hammer. He was the most feared god in Asgard, not because he was strong, or loud, or magical, but because he was certain. He was as certain and as unfeeling as the period at the end of a sentence. Time, in Asgard, heals wounds, but it also allows scars to harden. Years passed, decades. The incident with Loki and the dwarves faded, not from memory but from conversation. It became another of the dark, unspoken truths upon which the Golden City was now built. Loki himself was gone, vanished like a wisp of poison smoke. He was presumed to be hiding, healing, and, by those who knew him best, festering. He had been transformed from a mischievous rival into a mortal enemy, a creature of pure, focused, and mutilated hatred. But without his chaotic influence, Asgard became quiet. Too quiet. Tyr's justice was now the unchallenged law of the land. His one-handed presence at the thing, the Great Assembly, was enough to silence the most frivolous of disputes. The gods had learned that to bring a case before Tyr was to risk a judgment that was literal, cold, and utterly without mercy or compassion. His justice was not about finding peace. It was about finding the letter of the law and executing it precisely. Asgard, in its fear, became a model of order. Arguments were settled in private. Debts were paid on time. Oaths were spoken with a new, fearful precision. The city that had once been a place of raucous, joyful, and chaotic life, of feasting, fighting, and celebration, had become a perfect, sterile, and joyless machine. It was Tyr's masterpiece, a city ruled by pure, cold, and unbending consequence. The other gods settled into this new, grim peace. Thor, his great hammer Mjolnir at his side, found himself restless. He would pace the walls of Asgard, longing for a giant to smash, an enemy to fight. But the internal order was so absolute that even the external chaos seemed to quiet in response. He was a great, thunderous engine of war with no war to fight. Odin, the All-Father, retreated further into his own studies. He sat upon his throne, Hlitzgjaf, and stared out across the 9 realms, his one eye searching not for threats, but for answers. He knew the binding of Fenrir and the banishment of Loki were not solutions. They were merely delays. He knew that Ragnarok, the great twilight of the gods, was still coming. The threads of fate were still converging. He sent his ravens, thought and memory, to circle the worlds, bringing him whispers of the future, a future he was increasingly desperate to unmake. And Tyr simply was. He was the auditor. He was the administrator. He was the unblinking eye of the system. He oversaw the trade agreements with the dwarves, the patrols of the Valkyries, and the grain stores of the city. He did it all with a chilling, one-handed efficiency. He had lost his faith, but he had replaced it with an iron purpose. He was the wall that kept the chaos at bay. Into this cold, orderly world, one problem remained. One source of light. One single, vulnerable point that the entire system of Asgard now orbited nervously. Baldur. Baldur the Beautiful, the god of light, joy, and purity. He was the son of Odin and Frigg, and he was the one thing in Asgard that Tyr's cold logic could not touch, and that Odin's grim prophecies seemed to spare. He was universally loved. He was gentle, kind, and so pure that no lie could be spoken in his presence. He was, in essence, the living embodiment of everything Asgard used to be, before the lies, before the betrayals, before the sacrifice of Tyr's hand. Baldur was the city's soul, and one day, that soul began to feel a chill. It started quietly. Baldur, the god who had never had a dark thought, began to have nightmares. He would wake in the night, his perfect face slick with a cold sweat, his heart hammering. He would speak of dreams of darkness, of a cold hall, of a mist that had no end. He, the god of light, dreamed of a world without a sun. He told his mother, Frigg, The queen of the gods, who had borne the grimness of her husband's rule with a quiet strength, was now consumed by a new, active terror. This was not a problem for Tyr's laws. This was not a problem for Thor's hammer. This was a spiritual sickness. It is a premonition, Frigg declared, her voice trembling as she stood before the council, her eyes fixed on her husband, Odin. It is a shadow. My son, our son, the only light left in the city. Something is coming for him. Odin's one eye, which saw so much, was dark with a terrible knowledge. He knew what these dreams meant. He knew, with the sickening certainty of a prophet, that the first domino of Ragnarok was beginning to tremble. Frigg, however, was not a god of grim acceptance. She was a mother. If the law cannot protect him, she said, her voice rising, her gaze sweeping past Tyr, and if magic cannot predict a way out, her eyes on Odin, then I will protect him myself. I will use a mother's will. I will force the world to spare him. She would not, she decided, be bound by the letter of the law or the cynicism of prophecy. She would create a new, perfect, absolute protection. She would not let the darkness have her son. The great, cold peace of Asgard was about to be broken, not by a war, but by a mother's desperate, terrified love. Frigg, queen of Asgard, did not wait for a council, a debate, or a judgment. Her son's life, the very soul of her world, was at stake, and a mother's love is a force far older and more primal than any king's law. While Odin turned to his runes and Tyr to his ledgers, Frigg turned to the world itself. She left the cold, orderly halls of Asgard, her heart a storm of terror and resolves. Her quest was simple, and it was impossible. She would secure her son's safety, not with steel or with magic, but with a promise. She went one by one to all 9 realms. She spoke to fire, and the flames, in deference to the grieving queen, swore they would not burn Balder. She spoke to water, and the great, deep oceans and the rushing rivers swore they would not drown him. She spoke to iron, and to all metals of the earth, and they swore they would never cut his flesh. She went to the forests of Midgard and took an oath from every tree, the oak, the ash, the pine, that they would not form a spear to harm him. She spoke to the stones, from the pebbles on the path to the great mountains of Jotunheim, and they promised never to crush his bones. She spoke to the beasts of the wild, from the great bears to the wolves, and they swore they would not tear him. She even went to the dark places, speaking to diseases, to poisons, and to the venom in the serpent's fawn, and all, seeing the terror in a mother's eyes, swore they would not touch the god of light. It was the single greatest, most audacious legal and magical act in the history of the 9 realms. It was a billion contracts, a web of oaths so vast and so comprehensive that it held the cosmos itself in check. Odin watched her from his high throne, his one eye filled with a profound sadness. He knew that fate was a river, and that one could not stop it, only perhaps divert it for a time. He saw the hubris in his wife's act, the desperate attempt to build a dam against an ocean. And Tyr watched from his seat at the thing, and he felt not pity, but a cold, rising contempt. This was not law. This was a perversion. Frigg, in her emotional, terrified campaign, had not created order. She had created a billion exceptions. She had secured a special, protected status for one being, based not on merit or on judgment, but on love. It was the antithesis of Tyr's entire being. His law was that all must pay the price. All must be held to the same, cold standard. He, Tyr, had given his hand to prove that no one was above the consequence. And now, Frigg had just declared that her son, Balder, was. This, he knew, was not strength. It was a profound systemic weakness, a single, glaring loophole in the fabric of reality. Frigg's quest was almost complete. She had secured an oath from everything. Weary, exhausted, but her heart beginning to fill with triumph, she was returning to Asgard. She passed a small, unassuming shrub growing on the western wall of the city. It was a mistletoe. She paused, looking at it. It was so small, so soft. It was barely a plant at all, more of a weed. It had no thorns, no strength, no wood to make a spear. It was insignificant. "What harm could you do?" she whispered, a small, tired smile on her face. "You are too young even to swear a proper oath. You are harmless." And in her weariness, and in her certainty that her great work was done, she passed it by. She did not ask the mistletoe for its promise. She entered Gladsheim, her face radiant for the first time in months. "It is done," she declared, her voice ringing with joyous victory. "He is safe. My son is invincible. Nothing in the 9 realms can harm him." A great, true, and long-absent joy exploded in Asgard. The cold, sterile fear that had gripped the city was broken. They had a miracle. They had their soul, safe and secure. But the gods, being gods, were also warriors. They needed to see. "Let us test it," Thor boomed, his voice full of a childlike glee. He picked up a small pebble from the floor and tossed it gently at Baldur. The pebble, as it neared the god of light, suddenly veered sharply to the left, as if hitting an invisible wall, and clattered harmlessly to the floor. A stunned silence and then laughter. A great, roaring, joyful sound. It became a game. The gods, so long repressed by fear and cold law, became like children. They had a new, wonderful, and joyful sport. Test the invincible Baldur. One god threw a drinking horn. It shattered in midair, a foot from Baldur's chest. Another threw a knife. The blade spun, and its point turned to liquid, splashing at his feet. They threw spears, axes, and shields. Every object, every weapon, every threat was turned aside. Baldur stood in the center, laughing, his arms outstretched, as the love of the world, in the form of his mother's oaths, made him a living, breathing god-king. Even Thor, in his full, thunderous joy, heaved a great stone column from the hall and hurled it. The column dissolved into dust before it could reach the laughing god. Asgard was alive again. The city feasted, and their favorite entertainment was watching the god of light stand, perfect and unharmed, in a hail of 1,000 weapons. Frigg watched, weeping tears of pure joy. Her love had triumphed. Odin watched, his face ashen. He saw only the most profound and terrible hubris, a mockery of fate. And Tyr watched, his one hand clenched, his face a mask of cold disgust. He was not watching a celebration. He was watching a perversion. The law of consequence had been suspended for one beloved child. And far away, in a dark, cold cave, a creature with a ruined, sewn-shut mouth and eyes burning with a hateful, patient intelligence had been watching this new, joyful game. Loki had just found his loophole. The great, joyous game continued for days, which in Asgard stretched into weeks. The cold, sterile fear that had gripped the city under Tyr's hard justice was washed away in a flood of mead, laughter, and reckless celebration. The gods had found their joy again, and it was centered entirely on Baldur, the invincible. Thor found it to be the greatest sport of all. He would stand with his new hammer, Mjolnir, and hurl it with all his thunderous might, only to watch the most powerful weapon in the 9 realms veer harmlessly aside, missing its target as if drawn away by an unseen hand. Baldur would laugh, and Thor would laugh, and all of Asgard would join them. But not all. Odin, the All-Father, did not laugh. He sat on his throne, his one eye dark with a dread so deep it was a physical sickness. He saw not a game, but a hideous mockery of fate. He saw a city celebrating its own blindness, tempting the very doom it had tried to avoid. And Tyr did not laugh. The one-handed god of law did not attend the games. He did not watch. He found the entire spectacle to be disgusting. It was the celebration of a loophole. It was a party built on an exception to the rules of the cosmos. He, Tyr, had given his hand to prove that consequence was the universal law. And here, the entire Pantheon was celebrating the idea that Baldur, alone, was free from consequence. He saw it not as a strength, but as a systemic, fatal weakness. It was a crack in the foundation of reality, and Tyr knew, with the cold certainty of a judge, that something would find its way in. While the gods feasted and played, Tyr sat alone in the Hall of Justice, methodically signing trade agreements and border patrol edicts with his left hand. He was the only god in Asgard who was still working. He was not the only one watching. From the shadows, a third god observed the games. This god was not filled with dread or with disgust, but with a cold, analytical, and burning hatred. Loki, his face now a ruin of scars from the dwarves' needles, his mouth still aching from the memory of being sewn shut, had returned to Asgard. He had slunk back in unseen, unheard, his heart a cold, black stone of pure vengeance. And he had been watching this new game, watching the invincible god, watching the one glaring, emotional weakness of the Aesir. He knew he could not kill Baldur with a sword, or fire, or his own magic. But he was a god of lies, a god of loopholes. And Frigg, he suspected, had left something out. He changed his form. He was a master of it. He melted his features, shortened his height, and aged his skin, transforming into the guise of an old, hobbling woman, a crone, leaning heavily on a walking stick. He wrapped himself in a tattered shawl and joined the crowd of goddesses who were watching the spectacle, his voice a reedy, high-pitched cackle. He found Queen Frigg, who stood on a balcony, her face a perfect portrait of a proud, triumphant mother, watching her beloved son laugh as a volley of axes shattered into harmless dust at his feet. "Oh, my queen," the old woman wheezed, hobbling over to Frigg. "Such a marvel. Such a son. To see him so loved, so safe. You are the cleverest of all queens to have thought of such a thing." Frigg, who had received endless praise, was still hungry for more. She beamed at the old woman. "Thank you, good mother. It was a long journey, but he is safe. The world has given me its word." "Oh, all the world," the crone cackled, leaning closer. "Imagine that. Every single thing. Did you really ask the fire? And the great, deep sea? And the iron in the earth? Every single thing." My. Frigg's pride swelled. She loved to tell this part of the story. "Every single thing," she confirmed, her voice a little too loud, a little too proud. "From the great mountains to the smallest snake. All have sworn an oath." Loki, in his disguise, put a withered, trembling hand to his mouth, his eyes wide with feigned, gossiping awe. Not one thing was missed? But, my queen, that is impossible. Surely you overlooked something." Frigg laughed, a light, dismissive sound. It was the laugh of a victor who knows the game is already won. "Well," she said, leaning in, sharing a secret as one woman to another. "There was one, but it is nothing." Loki's heart, cold as it was, gave a single, triumphant thump. "Nothing," he whispered. "Oh, do tell, my lady, do tell." "On the western wall of Asgard," Frigg explained, "there grows a small shrub, a bit of mistletoe. It's so young, so harmless, barely a plant at all. I passed it by. It seemed too soft, too insignificant to even ask an oath from. What harm could a bit of mistletoe do, after all?" The old woman's eyes, for a fraction of a second, flashed with a red, burning fire. "No harm at all, my queen," the crone wheezed, bowing her head. "No harm at all. You are as wise as you are powerful." The disguised god offered a final, curtsying bow and then hobbled away, melting back into the crowd. The moment he was out of Frigg's sight, Loki's form shimmered. The old woman vanished. He was himself again, his scarred face twisted into a smile so vile, so full of triumphant hatred, it would have frozen the blood of any god who saw it. "Too insignificant," he whispered to himself. He slipped, unseen, from the hall. He went to the western wall of Asgard, where the sun cast long shadows. And there, just as the queen had said, was a cluster of mistletoe, green and pliant, a parasite on a great oak. He did not hesitate. He drew a small, sharp knife. His hands, so clever, so deft, whittled the soft, green wood. He did not craft a sword or an axe. He crafted a small, simple, perfectly sharpened dart. He hardened its point with a touch of his own, dark magic. He held it in his hand. The weapon, the loophole, the one single, insignificant thing in all the 9 realms that had not sworn an oath. He slipped the dart into his sleeve and returned to the celebration. The game was still in full, joyous swing. He scanned the crowd, his eyes passing over Thor, over the other, laughing gods. He needed a proxy. He could not throw it himself. He would be seen. His eyes landed on a figure standing at the edge of the crowd, apart from the others. It was Hodr, Baldur's brother, the god of darkness. And he was blind. Hodr stood, his face turned toward the sound of the laughter, a smile of shared joy on his face, even though he could not see the game. He was the only god not participating, for he could not aim. Loki's smile widened. It was perfect. The god of darkness, the blind, innocent brother. He slipped through the shadows and came to stand at Hodr's side, his voice a friendly, helpful, and utterly poisonous whisper. "Hodr, my friend," Loki said softly. "Why do you stand apart? Why do you not join the game and pay honor to your invincible brother?" The great hall was a vortex of noise and joyful chaos. At the edge of the celebration, the blind god Hodor stood, his face a portrait of longing. He could hear the laughter of his brother, Balder. He could hear the whistle of axes, the crash of stone, all turning to nothing. He was the only one who could not participate, the only one who could not give this gift of honor. Hodor, my friend. Loki's voice was a soft, sympathetic poison in his ear. Why do you not pay honor to your invincible brother? Hodor's face fell. He turned his sightless eyes toward the sound of Loki's voice. Loki, is that you? I cannot. I have no gift to throw, and even if I did, I cannot see. I would not know where to aim. I would only embarrass myself. Nonsense, Loki whispered, his voice full of false comfort. To not participate is the only embarrassment. You are his brother. Your honor should be the loudest. But how? Hodor asked, his hands fisted at his side, desperate to belong. I will be your eyes, Loki said smoothly. I will stand with you. And I even have a small gift. It is a trifle really, not a great, booming spear or a heavy stone. Just a small dart, a token. He slipped the small, green, and magically sharpened piece of mistletoe into Hodor's unsuspecting hand. Hodor felt it. It was light. It was small. It felt like a twig. This, he asked, confused. It feels like nothing. Will he even feel it? Oh, it is the gesture that matters, my friend, Loki purred. He placed his cold hand on Hodor's arm, over the blind god's hand that held the dart. Now, stand tall. Your brother is in the center of the hall. He is laughing, waiting for your tribute. Loki physically aimed Hodor's arm, not as an archer, but as a puppeteer. Hodor, his face now split in a smile of pure, naive joy, was finally part of the game. I hear him, Hodor said, his head tilted. He sounds so happy. Tell me when, Loki. He is ready, Loki whispered, his own scarred face twisted into a mask of pure, ecstatic hatred. Show him your love, Hodor. Show him your honor. Now. With a joyous, brotherly shout, Hodor threw the dart. Loki's hand guided the throw, giving it a speed and an accuracy that the blind god could never have managed. The small, green dart, the one insignificant exception to a billion oaths, flew silently across the hall. It did not veer. It did not shatter. It did not turn to dust. It flew faster than any eye could follow, a silent, green speck in a storm of joyful noise. Balder, the god of light, was standing in the center of the room, his arms outstretched, his face turned to the sky in a beatific, laughing smile, as a volley of broken shields clattered at his feet. The mistletoe dart struck him in the chest. It was not a powerful blow. It was a prick. It looked, for a moment, like a small, green leaf had simply landed on his white tunic. The laughter in the hall stopped. It did not die slowly. It shattered. In one, single, horrific instant, the music, the shouts, the joy, all of it ceased, as if a great, divine hand had smothered the world. Balder stopped laughing. His smile wavered. He looked down, his expression one of pure, childlike confusion. He saw the small, wooden dart embedded in his chest. He saw a single, dark drop of blood well up around it. He looked up. His eyes, the color of the summer sky, found his mother, Frigg, on her balcony. He opened his mouth, not to scream, but to ask a question. And then, the light in his eyes went out. He stumbled. His knees buckled. And Balder the Beautiful, the god of joy, the invincible sun, the soul of Asgard, fell forward onto the stone floor, dead. For a full 10 seconds, no one moved. No one breathed. It was impossible. It could not have happened. Then Frigg screamed. It was not a sound of grief. It was a sound that tore the fabric of reality. It was a sound of cosmic, ultimate failure, a sound of a mother seeing the impossible happen. That one terrible sound was the death of joy in Asgard. The hall exploded into chaos. Gods rushed forward. Thor, his face a mask of disbelief, fell to his knees, rolling his brother over. Balder? Brother? Stop this jest. Be Balder. But the body was limp. The god was gone. Odin rose from his throne, his one eye blazing, not with grief, but with the cold, terrible, ancient fury of a king who has just seen his entire world burn. And of Loki, he was gone. The moment the dart had found its mark, he had dissolved into the shadows, his vengeance complete, his work of chaos perfectly and irreversibly finished. The gods, weeping, frantic, looked around, seeking a cause. And their eyes fell on the one god still standing in a throwing stance, his face a mask of pure, horrified confusion, his blind eyes wide. "Hodor," one of them whispered. Did I do it?" Hodor asked, a terrible, hopeful smile still on his face. "Did I hit him? Why has the music stopped? Brother, Baldur, why do you not laugh?" From his hall, Tyr, the one-handed god, heard the scream. It was a sound that cut through stone and steel. It was the sound of a system collapsing. He walked, his steps measured, to the great hall and stood in the doorway. He saw the scene. The weeping gods, the dead, beloved son, the blind, unwitting murderer, the hysterical, broken queen, and the small, insignificant, fatal piece of wood still embedded in Baldur's chest. Tyr felt no grief. He felt no shock. He felt only a cold, profound, and terrible validation. Frigg's law of emotion had failed. Her exception had proven fatal. The loophole he had so disdained had been found and exploited. The celebration was over. The law of consequence, his law, was the only thing left. And the consequence for this was Ragnarok. The silence that followed Frigg's scream was the sound of a world ending. It was a cold, absolute void where joy, light, and laughter had just been. Baldur, the soul of Asgard, lay dead on the stone floor, a single, insignificant piece of mistletoe embedded in his chest. The gods, who had moments before been roaring with laughter, were now a frozen portrait of horror. Frigg was the first to move. Her scream of denial and cosmic failure collapsed into a low, animalistic wail. She threw herself onto her son's body, her hands clawing at his tunic, as if she could shake the life back into him. "No," she whispered, her voice a broken rasp. "No, my son, my light. No. I forbid it. I forbid it." But the oaths she had gathered were useless against a mother's greatest fear, now made real. Thor was next. He fell to his knees beside his brother, his great hand, the one that wielded Mjolnir, trembling as he reached out to touch Baldur's pale, still warm cheek. "Brother," he whispered, his voice thick with a confusion so deep it was an agony. "Brother, wake up. The jest is over." But there was no answer. The light was gone. Thor's face, usually a mask of boisterous joy or thunderous rage, crumbled. He let out a low, strangled sob, a sound so unnatural for the god of thunder that it was more terrifying than any of his roars. Odin, the Allfather, did not move from his throne. He did not weep. His one eye, which had seen the rise and fall of stars, was fixed on his dead son. He saw not just a body, he saw the future. He saw the first, irreversible step of Ragnarok. This was not just a death, it was a prophecy fulfilled. The Fimbulwinter, the Great Winter, would come now. The axes and swords of the final battle were, in this moment, being forged. His grief was a cold, hard, and terrible thing. The grief of a king who has just lost not only his son, but his kingdom. And then, all eyes, one by one, turned to the cause. Hodor, the blind god, was still standing where Loki had left him, his arm outstretched, his face a mask of utter, terrified confusion. Why is everyone silent?" he cried, his voice trembling. "What has happened? I heard the queen scream. Baldur? Brother? Did I do well? Did I finally play the game?" No one answered him. The silence was his answer. "What have I done?" he whispered, his hands flying to his sightless eyes, as the terrible, impossible truth crashed down on him. No. Loki. Where is Loki? He guided my hand. He gave me the dart. But Loki was gone. The architect of the fall had vanished into the shadows he so loved, his laughter a silent echo in the ruins of their joy. Into this tableau of grief, Tyr, the one-handed god of law, stepped from the doorway. He had been in his hall, working when the world had ended. He surveyed the scene with a cold, unblinking, and terrible clarity. He saw the weeping gods, their order shattered by raw, primal emotion. He saw the hysterical, broken queen, whose emotional exception to the law had created this fatal loophole. He saw the blind, unwitting murderer, the weapon in the crime. He saw the dead god, the victim. And he saw, in his mind's eye, the true criminal, the one who had exploited the flaw in the system, Loki. To Tyr, this was not just a tragedy. It was a catastrophic legal failure. He walked forward, his steady footsteps on the stone floor the only sound in the weeping hall. He did not go to Balder. He did not go to Frigg. He walked, his face a mask of cold iron, and stood directly in front of Hodr. Hodr, sensing his presence, flinched, his body shaking. Tyr, Lord Tyr. I did not know. I am blind. It was Loki. He tricked me. Tyr looked at the blind god. In Tyr's world, the letter of the law was all that mattered. And the letter was simple. Hodr's hand had thrown the spear that had killed a god. Intent was a messy, emotional, and irrelevant detail. You have slain a god. Tyr's voice was not loud, but it was absolute. It cut through the weeping and the wailing like a blade of ice. You have broken the peace of Asgard. You have committed the ultimate crime. But I was tricked. Hodr shrieked, falling to his knees. I am innocent. Innocence is a luxury the law does not recognize, Tyr stated, his voice flat. It sees only the act, and the act was yours. Thor looked up, his face wild with grief and a new, rising rage. No, he growled, his hand gripping Mjolnir. Not him. He is blind. He is my brother. The one to blame is Loki. I will find him. I will break him. You will hunt a fugitive, Tyr countered, not even looking at Thor. That is vengeance. I am speaking of justice. A crime has been committed. A price must be paid. The scales must be balanced. That is the law. The gods stared at Tyr, horrified. He was talking of sentencing Hodr here, now, in the shadow of his brother's body. Odin finally spoke, his voice a low, dangerous rumble from the throne. There will be no justice. Today, god of law, not your kind. Tyr turned, his one-handed gaze meeting the one-eyed stare of his king. My son is dead, Odin said, his voice shaking with a contained, volcanic fury. My other son is his unwitting murder. Your system is broken. Your balance is a mockery. This is not a matter for your courts, Tyr. This is a matter of blood. A blood debt has been incurred, and a blood debt will be paid. Tyr realized in that moment that his reign was over. His cold, procedural law had no power here. The emotion he had so disdained, grief, love, vengeance, had just washed over his perfect, sterile system like a tidal wave, drowning it. Asgard was no longer a city of law. It was a city of grief, and soon it would be a city of war. Asgard had known grief. It had known war. It had known fear. But it had never, in all its long, golden ages, known a silence like this. The laughter was dead. The light was gone. And in the center of its greatest hall lay the proof of its failure. The body of Balder was not prepared for burial by healers. It was prepared by his mother, Frigg, her eyes as dead and cold as the Niflheim she had once banished hell to, worked in a terrible, silent ritual. She washed her son's body, her hands moving with a mechanical precision that was more terrifying than any wail of grief. The other goddesses tried to help, but she pushed them away. This was her failure. This was her penance. The funeral was set. It would not be a simple burial. This was the son of Odin. This was the soul of Asgard. His funeral would be the funeral of an entire age. Baldur's great ship, Ringhorni, the largest in all the 9 realms, was brought to the shore. It was so vast, so heavy, that not even the gods, in their collective grief-stricken weakness, could move it into the sea. They were forced to summon Hiraken, a giantess from Jotunheim, who rode on a great wolf with vipers for reins, to push the ship into the water. The very act was a humiliation. They had to ask a giant, their sworn enemy, to help them bury their son. The gods gathered on the shore. It was not an assembly. It was a collection of broken souls. Odin, the Allfather, stood at the head of the pyre, which was built on the deck of the great ship. He did not look like a king. He looked like an old man. He leaned over his son's body, and the gods saw him whisper something into Baldur's ear. No one knew what he said, a final secret, a promise of vengeance, a question for the dead. He then took his ring, Draupnir, the ring of endless gold, and placed it on the pyre, a gift for his son, and a symbol that all the wealth of Asgard was now hollow and meaningless. Frigg, her work done, her face a mask of stone, simply collapsed. Her love had been her weapon, and her weapon had been turned against her. Her grief was so profound, so heavy, that it broke her heart. Thor, his face red and swollen, his eyes raw, stood beside the pyre.
He did not speak.
He merely raised his hammer, Mjolnir, the hammer given to him by the very dwarves who had sewn Loki's mouth. The hammer, which had been a gift of joy, now felt like a curse. He raised it, and in a voice choked with a grief he could not understand, he hallowed the pyre, setting it aflame with a crackle of divine, sorrowful lightning. And where was Tyr? He was there. He stood, as he always did, apart from the others. He was on a high, cold cliff overlooking the shore.
He did not weep.
He did not mourn.
He watched.
He watched the chaos. He watched the raw, unrestrained, and useless display of emotion. He saw gods, the supposedly superior beings of order, rendered completely ineffective by their own sorrow. He saw Frigg, whose emotional exception had caused this, now broken by it. He saw Odin, the great king, reduced to whispering secrets to a corpse. He saw Thor, the great warrior, using his ultimate weapon to light a bonfire. To Tyr, it was not a tragedy. It was an audit. It was the final, bloody, and undeniable proof of his own cold philosophy. This, he thought, his one hand clenching at his side, is what emotion gets you. This is what love costs. This is the price of exceptions. His system, his cold, hard, unfeeling law, would never have allowed this. His law would have seen Baldur as just one more citizen, not a special, beloved son. His law would not have been blinded by love. His law would have seen the mistletoe not as an insignificant plant, but as an unsworn variable. He had not been broken. He had been proven right. As the great ship, Ringhorni, a floating mountain of fire, began its journey into the setting sun, Odin, his face lit by the orange flames, turned back to the assembled, weeping gods. His voice, when it came, was not the voice of a grieving father. It was the low, iron-hard voice of a king who has just declared a war. "My son, Hoder," he said, and the name hung in the air like a death sentence. "He is in the dungeons. He will not be tried by the thing." His one eye scanned the crowd, and it paused, for a fraction of a second, on Tyr. He will not be given the cold, clean comfort of the law. He is a murderer, tricked or not. A blood debt has been incurred. Odin's voice dropped, and the gods, even in their grief, shivered. They had never heard this tone from him before. This was not the god of wisdom. This was the god of the gallows. And a blood debt will be paid by blood. Fate has decreed that a son of Odin must avenge the death of a son of Odin. And since my blind son is the killer, I will have a new son. The gods stared, horrified. This was not law. This was dark, ancient, and terrifying blood magic. "I will find the giantess, Rinder," Odin declared, his voice a vow. "And from her, a son, Vale, will be born. He will be born for a single purpose. He will not wash.
He will not eat.
He will not sleep. He will be a creature of pure, divine vengeance. And on the day he is but 1 night old, he will come to Asgard, and he will kill his brother, Hoder. That is how this debt will be paid." Tyr heard this, and he felt the last, tiny spark of his connection to Asgard die. Odin, his king, the man who had sat at the head of the thing, the assembly of law, had just cast it all aside. He had not come to Tyr for a trial. He had not sought a judgment. He had bypassed the entire system of justice that Tyr had sacrificed his hand to protect. Odin, in his grief, had turned to the very thing Tyr had given his life to fighting: primal, emotional, chaotic vengeance. Tyr turned his back to the burning ship. He did not care about the hunt for Loki, which he knew would be declared next. That was just an animal hunt. This was the end of his world. The law had not died. It had simply been rendered irrelevant. He was a judge with no court, a lawgiver with no authority. He was just a one-handed god, a relic of an age of reason that had just burned to death, right along with Baldur. The final embers of Baldur's funeral ship died against the cold, darkening sea. Odin's terrible vow, a new son, a state-sanctioned murder, a brother to kill a brother, hung in the air, colder than the wind. The assembled gods, already broken by grief, were now shattered by this new, dark command. This was not the king they knew. This was not the All-Father, the seeker of wisdom. This was a grieving, primal, and terrifying old man, willing to burn the foundations of his kingdom to satisfy his need for vengeance. Thor, his face a mask of brutal confusion, looked from the sea to his father. "Father, kill Hoder? He is blind." It was Loki. Loki is the one we must hunt. And we will hunt him, Odin's voice was a low growl, his one eye glowing in the twilight like a hot coal. "We will find Loki, and the torments we invent for him will be sung about until the end of all things. That is a hunt. That is rage." He then turned his burning gaze, and it landed, with a terrible, pointed weight, on Tyr. "But this is not for Tyr's law," Odin sneered, the word law tasting like poison in his mouth. "This is a matter of blood, a balance, a son for a son. Your system, God of Law, is what failed us. Your cold, hard procedure was blind to the love that Frigg used to protect him, and it was blind to the hate that Loki used to kill him. Your system is a failure. It is a dead thing." The gods flinched. It was the ultimate public repudiation. The king himself had just declared the law irrelevant, and Tyr, who had been silent, who had been a statue of cold observation on the cliff, now moved. He walked down the rocky path, his one-handed gait steady, his face unreadable. He did not look at the weeping gods. He did not look at Thor. He walked until he stood directly before his king. He was not there to plead. He was not there to mourn. He was there as an auditor at the end of the world. "You are a fool," Tyr said. The voice was not loud, but it was so cold, so absolute, that it silenced the sound of the ocean. Thor's hand, in a reflex, went to his hammer, shocked at the blasphemy. "Tyr," Odin warned, his voice a low threat. "No," Tyr said, his gaze meeting his king's. "You are a grieving father, so you are permitted your emotions. But you are also a king. And as a king, you are a fool. You are doing the exact thing that Loki wishes." "He wished my son dead," Odin roared. "He wished this," Tyr corrected, his empty sleeve a stark, pointing gesture to the chaos around them. "He wished for the end of order. He wished for the god of wisdom to abandon wisdom. He wished for the king of Asgard to declare a blood feud, the primal law of the giants, in the center of his own hall. And you have given it to him, willingly." Tyr looked at the stunned, weeping gods. "You are all slaves to your feelings. You wept so you could not see. You loved so you were blind. And now you rage so you cannot think. This, Vala, this avenger you speak of? You would bring another child into this world for the sole purpose of murdering another? You would make kinslaying the official policy of the crown?" He took a step closer, his one-handed presence more intimidating than Thor's hammer. "I gave my hand," he whispered, the words a razor, "to uphold the idea of Asgard. The idea that we are better than the chaos. That our system, our law, is what separates us from the monsters. And you, with a word, have just taken a torch to the entire thing. You have become the monster. You have proven Fenrir right. You have proven Loki right.
There is no law.
There is only power and grief and teeth. You are no better than the wolf." For a long, terrible moment, Odin stared at Tyr. The king's face was a storm of rage, grief, and a terrible, sickening truth. He had been seen. His primal, ugly motive had been laid bare by the one god who had no feelings to hide behind. Odin's hand, crackling with a dark, killing energy, rose. He would strike down this god of insolent truth. But he didn't. He couldn't, because in his heart he knew Tyr was right. But it was too late. The vow had been made. Fate had been set in motion. Odin's hand lowered. "Your system is dead, Tyr. It died with Baldur. My vengeance is all we have left." He turned his back on Tyr, a final act of dismissal. He faced the assembled, shattered gods. "Find Loki," he commanded, his voice now empty of all emotion save a cold, dark purpose. "Hunt him. Bring him to me. The rest of you, prepare for winter. A long one." As if summoned by the king's words, a single, cold, and perfect snowflake drifted down from the gray sky. It landed on the smoking, black ashes of Baldur's pyre and sizzled for a moment before being joined by another. And another. A cold wind began to blow. The Thimble winter, the great, 3-year winter that would precede the end of all things, had begun. The gods, now given a purpose, a direction for their rage, began to disperse. Thor gripped Mjolnir, his eyes already scanning the horizon, a hunter's light replacing his grief. The hunt for Loki was on. Tyr was left alone on the shore. The king had rejected him. The gods had abandoned him for the simple, emotional release of a hunt. He looked at the falling snow, which was already beginning to cover the blood and tears on the shore. He was the god of law, in a world that had just declared law dead. He was the god of justice, in a kingdom that had just chosen vengeance. He was, at last, truly and completely on his own. The snow that began to fall on the ashes of Baldur's pyre did not stop. It was not the gentle, white snow of a mortal winter. This was the Fimbulwinter. It was a cold, driving, and angry snow, a physical manifestation of a broken world. The sun, as if in grief, grew weak and pale, a forgotten smudge in a sky of permanent, bruised gray. The winds did not whistle. They howled, carrying the echoes of Frigg's first scream. Asgard, the golden city, was buried. Its radiant towers became spikes of gray ice. Its joyful, open-air halls became wind-swept tombs. The great feasting tables in Valhalla sat empty, draped in snow. The age of joy was over. The age of grief had passed in a single, fiery night. Now the age of rage had begun. Asgard was a city without a king. Odin, the All-Father, was gone. He was not on his throne. He was not in his library. He was out in the Nine Realms, a dark and terrible wraith, on his own grim quest, to find the giantess Rindr, to fulfill his vow, to father the son, Vali, who would be his instrument of vengeance. He had abandoned wisdom, abandoned his kingdom, for a blood feud, and the other gods, given their final command, had scattered. Asgard was empty. Thor, his grief forged into a new, singular, and terrifying weapon, was the leader of the hunt. He was no longer a defender of realms. He was a bloodhound. He tore across the 9 worlds, Mjolnir in hand. He smashed mountains in Jotunheim, demanding Loki's location. He boiled seas with his lightning, roaring the trickster's name. He was a storm of pure, unthinking, and utterly fruitless rage. The other Aesir followed in his wake, Sif, Baldur's grieving widow Nanna, who had thrown herself on his funeral pyre and died of grief, and the other gods, now just a vengeful, scattered mob. They hunted for Loki, but Loki was the god of lies, and he could not be found by those blinded by emotion. The hunt was chaos. It was what Tyr had predicted. It was vengeance, not justice, and it was inefficient. And in the great, silent, snow-filled city of Asgard, who was left? Heimdall was at his post on the Bifrost, as he always was, a silent statue against the howling gray, his horn at his lips, waiting for the end. And Tyr, the god of law, the god who had been told his system was dead. He stood in the great, empty hall of justice. The Thing, his court. The high seat of the judge was covered in a drift of snow that had blown in through the broken windows. His law books were frozen. His scales of justice were crusted with ice. Odin was right.
His court was dead.
The idea of law had been murdered, just as Baldur had been. Tyr looked at the ruins of his life's work. He felt nothing. No grief, no despair, and most importantly, no rage. He felt only the cold, hard certainty of his own, correct calculations. Emotion had failed. Vengeance was failing. Only order remained. He turned his back on the ruined, symbolic hall. He was no longer a judge. A judge requires a society that still believes in justice. He was now something else. He walked, his step steady, through the blizzard-filled streets of the empty city. While Thor hunted a ghost, Tyr went to the granaries. He found the keepers, the few, terrified non-gods and servants left behind, huddled and freezing. How much food? Tyr's voice was the only thing in Asgard that was not shaking. My lord, for who? The gods are gone. For Asgard, Tyr replied. For Heimdall on the wall. For the servants. For the horses in the stable. For the system.
How much?
Food. He began an inventory. With his one capable left hand, he made notes. He calculated rations. He organized the granaries, his mind a perfect, cold, calculating machine. He left the granaries and went to the armories. The gods, in their haste, had left them in chaos. Spears were scattered. Shields were unpolished. The warriors are gone. The smiths mumbled. Their forges cold. Warriors are emotional, Tyr stated. But soldiers are not. A soldier follows procedure. We are soldiers. We will prepare for the true enemy. Not Loki, but what comes after. He began organizing the armories. He ordered the walls to be reinforced. He set patrols, not to hunt, but to watch. Tyr, the rejected god of law, had found a new, terrible, and solitary purpose. Odin, the king, had abandoned his post to pursue vengeance. Thor, the champion, had abandoned his post to pursue rage. Tyr, the administrator, would not abandon his. He was no longer the god of justice. He was the god of logistics. He could not save Asgard. He knew, with the certainty of a mathematician, that the end was coming. Odin's vow, the death of Balder, the Fimbulwinter, the equation had been solved. Ragnarok was the answer, but he could control how Asgard met its end. It would not be as a weeping, chaotic, emotional mob. It would not be a city that starved because its leaders were on a tantrum. It would not be a city that fell because its walls were unmanned. He, Tyr, the one-handed god of procedure, would ensure that Asgard met its doom in an orderly fashion.
He would hold the line.
He would fill out the ledgers. He would file the reports. And when the final, great, chaotic enemy arrived, he, the last pillar of order, would be standing at his post, ready and accounted for. The Fimbulwinter was not an event. It was a new, permanent state of being. The first year of the Great Snow was a shock. The second was a misery. By the time the third year had ground on, the sun was not even a memory. It was a myth from a warmer, forgotten world. Asgard was a fortress of ice, a golden city now pale and gray, entombed in a glacier of its own grief. And in this frozen, empty kingdom, one god still walked the halls.
Tyr.
He was not a king. He was not a warrior. He was, as he had become, the administrator. While the winds howled and the ice cracked, Tyr, the one-handed god of procedure, kept the last, flickering ember of order alive. His days were a ritual. In the dawnless, gray morning, his footsteps would be the only sound in the great hall, crunching on the snow that covered the stone floors. He would go, first, to the granaries. With his left hand, he would make his mark in a great, frost-covered ledger, allocating one more day of rations. He counted every grain. He knew, to the ounce, how much food Asgard had. From there, to the armories. The forges were not cold. He had ordered them kept alight, not for warmth, but for readiness. The remaining servants and smiths, their faces gaunt, their breath pluming in the air, followed his orders, not out of love, but because his cold, logical commands were the only thing in this new world that still made sense. They sharpened spears that would not be used. They polished shields for gods who were not there. And he would stand, for a time, on the great, ice-covered wall, next to the silent, frozen figure of Heimdall. The great sentry still stood at his post, his horn at his lips, his eyes, which could see for 1,000 miles, scanning the white, endless, driving blizzard. The two of them, the Watcher and the Administrator, were the only two gods in Asgard who had not abandoned their posts. They were the system, holding on, waiting for the end they both knew was coming. Then one day they came. A sound, not of the enemy, but of failure. The great, frozen gates of Asgard were pushed open. Into the hall, a group of figures stumbled, their armor caked in ice, their beards a solid mass of frost. It was Thor. He was not the boisterous, joyful warrior. His eyes were hollow, red-rimmed with a rage that had burned itself out, leaving only a cold, bitter ash. Mjolnir, in his hand, seemed to droop, its power useless against an enemy he could not find. The great hunt had failed. We could not find him. Thor's voice was a low, broken growl. He is nowhere. He is a wisp of smoke. He is gone. And the realms are dying. The snow is everywhere. The other gods who had followed him, warriors, hunters, straggled in behind him. They were defeated. They were starving. Their great, emotional, chaotic quest for vengeance had led them to a dead end. Tyr met them in the hall. He was not holding a horn of welcoming mead. He was holding his ledger. Thor. Tyr's voice was flat, cutting through the weary groans. You have returned. I see 10, 12, 14 others. State your names, so that I may add you to the ration logs. Thor stared at him, his mind too slow, too cold to understand. Rations? Brother, we have failed. Loki is. Your hunt is irrelevant, Tyr stated, his voice as cold as the wind. Your rage was your own affair. My affair is the logistics of this city. You are a new drain on the resources. You will be fed, but you will be assigned duties. The eastern wall needs to be cleared of ice. The gods stared at him, this one-handed administrator who was talking of duties at the end of the world. They had come back broken, seeking what? Solace? Leadership? And they had found only an auditor. But before Thor could find the words to argue, a new, More terrible presence filled the hall. The great doors, which Thor had left open, now revealed a new figure. Odin. He was no longer the king. He was a thing of the winter. He was gaunt, his robes torn, his beard caked with ice, but his one eye was a universe of black, cold, and triumphant fire. And he was not alone. At his side stood a figure that was, perhaps, one day old. He was tall, lean, and crackling with a terrifying, newborn power. He was unwashed. He had not spoken. He carried a great yew bough. This was Vali, the Avenger, the son born of vengeance, for the sole purpose of a single act. Father. Thor whispered, but Odin did not look at him. Odin's gaze and Vala's swept the hall. They were not looking for Thor. They were not looking for Tyr. They were looking for the one who was not there. The dungeon. Odin's voice was a rasp, a sound of rust and ice. Vala, the one-day-old god, moved. He did not walk. He flowed. He was a predator. He moved past the broken hunters, past the astonished Tyr, and to the great, iron-bound door that led to Asgard's cells. Tyr had, of course, been feeding Hoder. The blind god was a prisoner. The procedure for prisoners was that they be fed. He was part of the inventory. The sound of the great iron door being ripped from its hinges echoed through the hall. Then a single, terrified scream cut short.
No. Who is there? Please.
I am blind. It was Hoder. A single thwack of a bowstring. A wet, final sound. And then silence. Vali, the Avenger, emerged from the dungeon, his bow still in his hand. He was one day old. His purpose was complete. He had slain his blind, unknowing half-brother. The blood debt was paid. The scales of vengeance were balanced. Odin looked at the scene. He looked at his failed son, Thor. He looked at his cold, judging son, Tyr. And he looked at his new, successful, and monstrous son, Vali. The vengeance is done, Odin declared. The scales are balanced. Tyr, watching this murder, this obscene, emotional, chaotic act of kinslaying, felt nothing but the cold, final proof. Odin's way was just as chaotic, just as failed as Thor's. Your hunt failed, Odin said, his gaze falling on Thor. You hunted with rage. You will never find him that way. But I have seen him. In my torment, in my quest, I saw him. Odin raised his hand. His vengeance was sated, but his justice was not. He is in Midgard. He hides as a fish. He hides as a flame. But he cannot hide from me. The hunt is over. Now we make the capture. Now we show him what real law looks like. He looked at Tyr. A cold, terrible, and final understanding passed between them. The king had returned, and he had brought a new, darker order with him. The final hunt was not a hunt at all. It was an execution of a foregone conclusion. Odin's dark quest had given him more than vengeance. It had given him clarity. He, who had once sacrificed his eye for a drink from the well of wisdom, had now seen the world through the cold, clear lens of a father's grief. He led his reassembled, broken gods, Thor, silent and grim, Vali, a living weapon, and the others, now just a cold, hard pack, to the mortal realm of Midgard. They did not hunt with rage, as Thor had. They hunted with the cold precision of an executioner. They found Loki, as Odin had seen, in the pool of Fenrir, disguised as a salmon, leaping in a waterfall. He was not found by rage, but by procedure. They blocked the river. They cast a net, and when he leaped, Thor's hand, no longer swinging in blind fury, shot out and gripped the slimy, wriggling fish. The grip was so hard, so full of a cold, final hatred, that Loki was trapped. In an instant, the salmon was gone, and the god, Loki, was held in Thor's iron grasp, his face a mask of abject, animal terror. The hunt was over. They did not kill him. That was not the plan. They dragged him, bound and silent, back across the 9 realms. They dragged him through the driving, endless snow of the Fimbulwinter, back to the frozen, gray city of Asgard. They did not take him to a dungeon. They took him to the great, frozen hall of the Thing, the Hall of Justice, Tyr's Hall. They threw him, shivering, at the foot of the icy high seat. The returned gods of Asgard, Odin, Thor, Vali, and the others, formed a cold, silent semicircle. This was not a trial. It was a sentencing. Loki, his silver tongue useless, his scarred mouth trembling, looked at the faces. He saw no mercy.
He saw no law.
He saw only ends. You. Loki's voice was a hoarse whisper. You hypocrites. You murderers. You blame me? For what? For killing the son you all made a mockery of? For pointing out the one fatal flaw in your stupid queen's perfect plan? He spat. You talk of law? Where was the law for my children? You cast the serpent into the sea. You banished my daughter to the ice. You. His eyes met tears. You tricked my son, Fenrir, and cheated him. You broke every law first. I am not the disease, Asgard. I am the symptom. Odin stepped forward. His one eye was a void. You are correct. The Allfather's voice was a rumble of ice. We did break the law. We, in our fear, became liars. And you, in your spite, became a kinslayer. The system is broken. All of it. He turned his gaze, and it fell upon Tyr, who stood at the edge of the circle, his ledger of rations and supplies still in his one capable hand. Tyr, Odin commanded, the god of law, you who have been our auditor, our consequence, you who have sacrificed the most for this system, I ask you, now, to give this creature his sentence. What is the procedure for this? The moment had come. The final test. All of Tyr's cold, hard work had led to this. He was the judge. He held the power. He had been given the authority to pass the final sentence. He looked at Loki, the creature of chaos, the cause of all his pain, the murderer of Balder. He looked at Odin, the king of vengeance, who had murdered Hoder. He looked at Thor, the champion of rage, who had failed and now stood silent, waiting for blood. And Tyr, the god of law, the god of procedure, the one-handed auditor of the apocalypse, saw the final, terrible truth. There is no difference, he said. The god stared. What? Thor growled. There is no difference between any of you. Tyr's voice was not angry. It was not sad. It was simply final. He dropped his ledger. It clattered on the icy floor, the pages of Asgard's survival scattering. You, Odin, Tyr said, his gaze meeting his king's, are a kinslayer. You used a dark, primal blood oath to murder your own son in a cold dungeon. You are a giant king, ruling by vengeance. You, Thor, he continued, are a creature of pure, mindless rage. Your hunt failed because it was emotional. You are no better than the thunder you command, loud and random and useless. He looked at Loki. And you are spite. You're chaos. You are the mirror that shows them what they truly are. You are no worse than they are. You're just more honest about it. He stepped back, away from the circle. You ask me for a procedure, Allfather? You ask me for a sentence? This is not a court of law. This is a blood feud between monsters. My system is not for this. My system was to prevent this, and it failed, because it was run by you. A terrible, stunned silence filled the hall. Tyr had not just passed sentence on Loki. He had passed sentence on them all. Then you are done, Odin whispered, his voice a blade. I am, Tyr agreed. He looked at his right arm, the empty sleeve. I paid this price to protect an idea. The idea is dead. The debt is cancelled. Odin turned from Tyr. His face was a terrible mask. So be it.
There is no law.
There is no procedure. There is only this. And what followed was not law. It was not justice. It was a primal, horrific, and eternal punishment. The gods, now a simple, vengeful mob, dragged Loki to a deep, dark cave. They brought his two sons. Vale, the Avenger, in his cold, dark purpose, transformed one into a wolf who promptly tore the other to pieces. With the entrails of Loki's own son, the gods bound the trickster to 3 great, sharp stones. It was a binding of blood, not of law, and above him, they fixed a great serpent, its fangs dripping a single, burning drop of venom, over and over onto his face, forever. This was their justice. A final, horrific emotional spasm. As the first screams of the bound god echoed from the cave, screams that would last until the end of the world, one figure was seen walking away.
Tyr.
He did not go back to the Hall of Justice. He did not go to the granaries. His work as an administrator was over. His work as a judge was a mockery. He walked, his step steady through the driving 3-year winter. He walked past the silent, ice-bound halls. He ascended the great, high wall of Asgard. Heimdall was there, as he always was, his horn at his lips, staring into the white, endless blizzard. Tyr, the one-handed god, stopped beside him. He did not look back at the city. He did not look back at the cave where a god was screaming. He looked outward. "It is done," Heimdall said, his voice the first sound in a year that was not the wind. "The petty things are done," Tyr corrected. He drew his sword, his left hand gripping the hilt. He looked at his right arm, the stump. The phantom pain was gone. The moral, philosophical pain was gone. He had been the god of righteous law, and it had failed. He had been the god of cold procedure, and it had been rejected. Now he was just a soldier on a wall at the end of the world. His king was a murderer. His champion was a failure. His city was a tomb. But the wall was provisioned. The armory was stocked. His procedure had been followed. He was not waiting for Loki's screams to end. He was not waiting for Odin's rage to cool. He was listening for a different sound. A sound in the dark. A sound of a great, binding chain. A chain made of impossibilities, finally and inevitably snapping. He was waiting for the real chaos. He was waiting for Fenrir,